Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin.
I did want to let y'all know, if you have been following me and enjoying some of the bit information that we have got, we have a new online course that's being released. It has only been available up till now in a masterclass version that is like 30 hours long. We are now going to release the original 6 modules of that course, which does include the bit video, but a lot of add-ons as well as a 70-page study guide that goes along with the course. We have also included in this self-guided course 2 of the videos from the master class where we had some special guests coming in. So that's something like an extra 4 to 5 hours worth of content for you to watch that I think adds a lot of value to the course and gives you an idea of what the master class would be like if you decided to upgrade to it at a later time. You also, because you've already bought the self-guided part of the course, you won't have to pay full freight for the master class version if you decide to go to it later. If you're interested in checking that out, head over to thebitcourse.com. We will have a link in the show notes to the specific page with the self-guided course if you're interested in more information. At the very least, I would encourage you to get on our subscriber list for the newsletter. I do send out pretty regular emails with some tips and things, and that's not stuff I share on social media. That's all exclusive to this particular newsletter. So anyway, check it out. I think it's well worth your time and money, and it does cover way more than just the dry bit mechanics and stuff you may think it has. It's got a whole lot in there about how to use your hands, how to apply this bit in practical terms versus that bit, kind of the differences between them, the things this is going to help you with versus that. So it isn't just mechanical kind of stuff. It's a lot of very practical information as well.
Our guest today is Sagebrush Sara, Miss Sara Lowe. Sara has over 35 years of knowledge and experience in the horse industry. She's worked with colts and troubled horses from the East Coast to the West Coast. She began as a 4-H student, riding hunter jumpers and Western pleasure horses, advancing to a successful member of the University of Wyoming's intercollegiate equestrian team. After college, she became a certified riding instructor under the Certified Horsemanship Association and then began working on various dude ranches. She moved to Dubois, Wyoming, or Dubois, I don't know how they say it up there, but she ran a 60-head Remuda ranch for several years, was in charge of breeding, training, and sales. She worked in Eagle Point, Oregon, where she spent several years starting gaited horses, including Rocky Mountain, Kentucky Mountain, and Tennessee walk-in horses. She proudly owned a magazine company called The Sale Yard that marketed horses, tack, and trailers online and in print from California to Washington. Unfortunately, in 2008, the economy crashed and Sara's life took a detour. However, it wasn't long in her career before she was able to blend her love of all things horse with her new career as a law enforcement officer. This new adventure helped her become a mounted enforcement instructor through the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy. Sara currently teaches a week-long 40-hour mounted enforcement class annually to certify officers and their equine partners. Throughout the spring and summer, she travels with her Confidence Course clinics, which are a melting pot of her horsemanship philosophies, some of her mounted enforcement exercises blended with mindfulness and energy work. She's ridden with Ray Hunt and Brian Newbert and is influenced deeply by Ray and Tom. Sara's clinics are constantly growing and evolving. She wants to share the wisdom and insight that she has gained along the way. She blends her interest in philosophy with horsemanship and has created a positive environment that enhances the communication and partnership between horse and human. And I'm going to add to that she is kind of like me, a mental health advocate for our horse and ranching communities. Sara, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Daniel. How are you?
I'm tickled to see you again. We originally met at Buck the Trend this past February, where we were both privileged to be in the first group of people going through that. And You are a force to be reckoned with. It was really a pleasure to meet you and come across you, and I'm tickled we get to have this conversation now.
Me too. Me too. It's going to be great.
Well, we start everybody off with our lightning round questions, and these are for points and prizes. So you want to be on your A game. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
If you were a Jedi, what percent chance is there that you would misuse the Force?
Daniel, the answer would be 100%. 100% chance I would misuse the Force. I mean, I got to put it out there. I have tased a spider before with my taser. So,
Oh, how big of a spider was
yes.
it? I gotta know about this now.
Well, it was one of them daddy long legs, and it was cruising across the floor at the sheriff's office, and we pulled out the cartridge on the taser and tased the spider, and it worked. So I'm pretty sure I would misuse the Force.
It all depends on what the definition of the word misuse is, right?
Correct, correct.
Morning or evening?
I am absolutely a morning person, and the older I get, the earlier I go to bed. Last weekend, I think I was in bed by 7. I was so tired. But I get up at 5 a.m. every morning, and I have my routine. I get up and I do some yoga just so I can stand up straight. And then I'll actually lift for a while, do a little bit of meditation, and that way that gets me in the mindset to get to work and go do my thing. So always early in the morning, and I've got that whole routine, get chores done, work on me so I can get dressed and go to work.
We did particularly with this time change coming, my wife and I went to bed at like 7:45 the other night, and I don't feel ashamed about it in any way, shape, or form. It was the right thing to do, you know.
Yep. Yeah, I used
How
to be a
long?
night owl earlier on. When I was younger, I liked to be up in the evenings and go do fun things. But these days, 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'm ready for bed. I'm ready to get up early and start over the next day.
I used to, when I had my phone number on the website, I used to have a line down there that basically said, if you call me after 9 p.m., someone had better be dead. Like that's, yeah.
Exactly.
Don't call me at 10:15 to chat, right? How long do you dunk a cookie in milk?
Well, Daniel, I don't drink milk and I don't eat cookies. So
Okay, fair
I'm
enough.
sorry.
I may have
Not
to
my thing.
disregard that question because I've had a bunch of I don't eat cookie people.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
It's the carbohydrate health in the horse business seems to be there's multiple people who's had a more serious take on nutrition than average, I would say. So
Well,
I
I try
like
to
that.
cut
That's
that
good.
sugar stuff out. Well, it causes so much inflammation. You got to cut all that sugar stuff out. So
It really, if you ever like for 2 or 3 months get off of it, and then you eat some, have a bad weekend and you fall off the
make
wagon,
you
like
sick.
Monday morning, your body will tell you what's going on there. Absolutely will.
100%. So that tells you a lot about what it's doing to your body.
Uh-huh. If you came across someone playing bagpipes, would you hit them with a shoe or a boot or just a closed fist?
You know, I love the sound of bagpipes, especially Amazing Grace, at
Uh-huh.
funerals. I mean, I'm in tears every time. But even some of the other stuff I've heard online, I'll hear those bagpipes, whether it's they're doing a parade or they're in some sort of an event. I just love the sound of them. I do. I love the sound of bagpipes. So I think I would just sit back and enjoy it and not throw random objects or missiles or fists or anything else at them. I would just enjoy the the bagpipes.
Fair enough. Do you have a favorite way to treat aches and pains?
Oh, my good friend Jared Rogerson sings about this. He's got a whole song about ibuprofen. I'll tell you what, it's like a daily supplement for me. So
Vitamin I.
ibuprofen, yes, vitamin I and cold showers. Gotta
Uh-huh.
love have your cold showers. And then in order to get moving, like I was talking about, I've got a gym in my house where I've got a foam roller and I've got an inversion table. And I'm so stiff in the mornings that I can barely move. So I've got to kind of crawl over to the gym and then, roll out my back just so I can get to moving in a stretch. Then I'll get on the inversion table, get everything lined out, and then I'm ready to go. Then I'm ready to lift and feel better.
Absolutely.
Yep.
What skill or technique do you not have with a horse that you have seen in someone else and you wish you did have with a horse?
Oh gosh, there's so many. That list is pretty darn long. Um, it's always been a dream, I guess, of mine to make my own bridle horse. I really have an interest in the Californios tradition. I was married into a Buckaroo, Nevada family years ago, and that's where I became interested in that art form. And there's such an art to that traditional bridle horse, and I have yet to have time to do that. I've been stuck in colt starting mode most of my life. Most of the horses I've had come in, they get 30, 45, 60 days, and I end up selling them. They have a good enough handle that most folks can get around them and send them down the road. So for me to have time to actually finish a horse, let alone make a bridle horse and ride them routinely enough and regularly enough is huge. But that's something I would like to do. That's on my bucket list of things I would like to learn and do in my lifetime. Straight up in the
More
two
people
rein.
should.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you kind of talk to like people that grow up riding in Europe, everybody over there learns to ride on a schoolmaster, especially the Spain and Portugal, and they probably have more advanced kids horses over there than we have, the general finished horse available over here. And you hear that a lot.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
more people need to hang on to that one and ride him for 6 years and make that finished horse out of him. So,
Exactly.
okay, I'm going to test this one out. It's a new question.
Uh-oh.
You feel free to refuse to answer if you want. Do you think the first person to ever bleach their butthole just misunderstood what it means to change your ringtone?
Wait, you got to share that one again, Daniel. Where
Do you think the first person to ever bleach their butthole just misunderstood what it means to change your ringtone?
uh, I I can't even come up with an answer to that one. I think I just have no comment. I'm trying to wrap my head around why are they bleaching their buttholes in the first place?
I can't answer that for you either. This is totally a movie reference. This is not anything
Is
I've
it?
personal. Yeah, I have. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I thought it was a funny icebreaker kind of a question. So, and I'm
Well,
always
that,
going to
that
go
would
for
be
the
a
funny,
funny.
right?
Funny is always number one. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, I can't even get the camera to work on my laptop, let alone try to change the ringtone on my phone. So, but I'm sure as heck not bleaching my butthole anytime soon.
It sounds like something that happens when you spend too much time in a hot tub or something like that, right?
Well, that's more turning into a raisin. Getting waterlogged.
What would you say is the most important quality of a horseman or horsewoman?
Oh, gosh, I can go in so many different directions with that, but I think it's the one that I struggled with for a long time that I'm starting to wrap my head around with the being present with your horse and riding the horse that you have at that moment. Um, Not carrying all those anxieties of future events and pains of past events into that space and just being completely present and aware of that horse that you have right now. I think that's one of the hardest things for us to do, but it's one of the best things that we can do for our horse. So being
I
present
like it.
right now in the moment.
I like it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well can you back a trailer?
Well, let me tell you, I could back a trailer in New York City. I could parallel park that son buck right there in the middle of Times Square. So I had to learn the hard way. when I got divorced and took off with my horse, my truck, my trailer, and my horses, I had to figure it out. And I had to make sure I could put that truck and trailer wherever I needed it to go because there was no asking someone to do it for me. So I've become quite proficient in backing my trailer in. Now, I'm probably handier with a gooseneck than I am with a bumper pull. Them squirrely little sons of bucks, they really get to moving left and right quick and they can get a little frustrating, but I can put any gooseneck anywhere you want me to put it. 2 weeks ago, I lost my voice and I'm not sure where it went. So it's kind of I got this raspy, weird voice thing going on. And I looked all over the house for it. I just can't find it. So
Do you get, I imagine, so Sarah's up in Wyoming, right? And I imagine it's cold. Do y'all kind of all have like that? You get the cold air and the dry air, and everybody gets a cold or a runny, bleedy nose, or like you just have this 2 week period where the weather changes and y'all are all messed up for a little while, or is that typical?
yeah, we definitely get that. Changes of weather can cause some issues and sickness, but most of my coworkers have young kids in school. And so every day when they come to the office, everybody loves to congregate in my office first thing in the morning. They come in, they bring their coffee. We have a visit about calls over the weekend or calls the night before and sit around and they all share whatever germs they picked up from their children in the school. So it's a combination of all of that, whether it's the weather or it's the little booger pickers, I'm not sure.
I think y'all had some fires not too long ago too, huh? So you had a lot of smoke and that kind of stuff in the air too, I'm sure.
It looked like the apocalypse here. I mean, it was really smoky, and we had two large fires that combined, and they're finally at about 95% containment now. So they've been sending everybody home. But we had type 1 teams out here up in that Du Bois country for a while, and those we just had those perfect conditions of high winds, dry temperatures, hot heat, all of the elements, ingredients you need for a fire to blow up. And it did. And it took out a lot of fuels. And we just had a lot of smoke in Fremont County for a while. It was hard to breathe.
Bay or sorrel?
Gosh, that's a tough one too. My very first horse was a bay. And my grandfather had offered to buy me my first horse when I was in middle school. And I was pretty blessed. I got to go up to Crowley's consignment sale up in Massachusetts. And it was the biggest horse auction east of the Mississippi. And my great uncle was best friends with the owner of that horse auction. He says, you go out there and you pick out whatever horse you want. I'm going to buy it for you. So me being a horse crazy young lady, I went and rode just about everything I could. And I found this foundation little solid bay with strangles and rain rot. But I was so into conformation and horse judging. I'm standing out there and I was picking him apart and making sure, his croup to his wither and his wither to his pole, everything was matching up and all the angles were right with the slope of his shoulder and his hip. And so I ended up coming home with that horse. And my gosh, he lasted me for, I think my mom was still riding him at 32 years old. He was 9 crosses back to king and just one of those bulldog old quarter horses that just held up. But then my next horse was a sorrel, big old Hanoverian. So I like both of them. I don't really have a favorite color. Right now I've got a gray and 2 Palominos. I've had pretty much every color of horse, just not a fan of like Cremellos and Perlinos, but I like them all. I can't choose between those two.
That's fair enough. I'm going to take this moment too. We have actually designed a Bay Horse Mafia logo and all of that stuff now. So this is one of these questions that I've thought would just be a 50-50 kind of a thing. And it's not even close to 50-50. It's like 90-10 people preferring Bay horses, which surprises and amuses me. So we decided we'd go with it. So now if you want to support the podcast, y'all can go to my website and we've got Bay Horse Mafia hoodies and long sleeve t-shirts and all of that good stuff.
I'm going to check that out. I probably owned more bays than I have sorrels if I think about it, but I still don't have a favorite.
When you meet a set of twins, do you ever have the urge to tell them at least one of them was unplanned?
I don't. I've never had that urge before. Twins are they're definitely an interesting thing. I've worked with a few sets of twins before and come across quite a few in my line of work. And some of the stuff they share about, they're finishing each other's sentences and reading each other's minds. There's something pretty cool about the whole twin thing. So, but I never chose to advise one of them they weren't planned.
Dogs or cats?
Well, I only have dogs. I wouldn't mind having a cat, but my dogs think that cats are snacks. So I can't have cats right now. They brought home a few of the neighbors' feral cats, and they were beyond rescue. They were pretty chewed up. So I'm gonna stay away from cats. I've had a couple cool cats, and there are cool cats out there for sure. But right now I've got 3 dogs, and hopefully stay at 3. I was up to 4 at one point, but when you only have 2 hands, you can only pet 2 dogs at a time. And it gets kind of hard. The more dogs you get, and they all want attention, and you can only pet 2 of them at a time. So I'll stick with dogs.
So what kind of dogs?
Well, the hardest part about being in law enforcement is you end up rescuing all these animals. So I've got a Kelpie healer that came out of a trailer park. I got called to a dog at large when I was on patrol on the street, and I found my little Kelpie healer along with her brother. And they were running down the road, and I could tell where they came from, and it was not a good situation. So I took them down to the local shelter and put a little note on the gate of the door and said, if nobody claims these dogs, I'll adopt one of them. Then I got a corgi. I found her in the middle of the highway, and I actually had 2 dogs in the cage from some other place I was taken to the shelter, and I'm driving down the road, and I had a trainee with me. I'm looking in the middle of the highway, and there's this orange bundle just running down the middle of the road, jumping up in the air, trying to catch a turkey vulture that was gliding down the top of the road. And I think the vulture was looking to, feed on some carrion on the side of the road, and the dog's trying to catch the vulture. So I bailed out of my truck and chased her down, and she flipped over, typical corgi, flipped over, rubbed my belly, and grabbed her, and was sure that she was probably someone's dog. She was in beautiful condition and a nice dog. And I put out, I called all of the local law enforcement agencies and made a ticket saying, hey, this dog was found at this location. If you're missing your dog, come claim it. And called all the vets' offices, and nobody ever claimed that dog. No one ever wanted her. So I've had a couple of those rescues, and then one of my clients recently contacted me and convinced me I needed a mini blue healer. We did a trade for a clinic spot, and the last thing I needed was another dog, but she said, this is my last litter, and you need one of these dogs, and twisted my finger. And so they allowed me to choose the runt of the litter, a little really cute, little solid, blue healer. And she turned out, she's just been growing like a weed. There's nothing small about her. And she's I call her the terrorist. She likes to chew on all the other dogs and everything else in her path. Very, very smart dog. One of those that you show her something once and she immediately picks up on it. So I'm a huge fan of blue healers. That's mostly what I've had. I'm liking having this corgi. I like dogs that like to stay at home. I've had some dogs in the past. I've got a couple 100 acres around my place, and there's just certain breeds. You open the door, tell them go out and go potty, and they are gone. Like a sight dog. They see a deer run, they see something, and they are gone. And at least with that corgi and the healer, and the Kelpie healer, they stay home. They stay close to home, so I don't have to check on them quite as much. So I like those types of homebody dogs,
Yeah, absolutely. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Absolutely 100% no. There is just something wrong with pineapple on a pizza. I mean, I guess everyone's got their own tastes. If they choose pineapple on their pizza, I'm not going to give you grief on it. But I don't care how hungry I am. I think I'd rather eat a stick before I eat a pineapple pizza.
Do you like pineapple in any other application, like a ham with the pineapple rings and a cherry on it, or anything like that, or just no?
The only way I'm going to eat pineapple is just buy the actual pineapple, cut it up, and eat it raw like that, just in its natural form. That is great. Other than that, all that weird candied or with meat and all that stuff, no way. Can't do it.
Are you a cook?
Oh gosh, and that's a good question. And let me be honest with you, Daniel. I started a fire trying to make instant oatmeal. So, when, when I was a city cop, it was the middle of the night, and I got me a packet of instant oatmeal. I stuck it in the microwave. I'm not really sure how long I put it in there, whether it was a minute or 10, but there was a lot of black smoke billowing out of that microwave, and apparently I forgot to add water to it. I am not a cook at all. I, I wish I could. I mean, I'm good at following directions, and oftentimes I'll try to cook something and I'll follow those directions, but it never turns out the way it's supposed to. So that is just not something I was gifted with. I have no natural ability to cook.
What is your horse industry related pet peeve?
Hmm. My biggest horse industry related pet peeve would be the anthropomorphizing of the horses. I hear it all the time with folks in the clinics, and their horse is mad, their horse is sad, they have some sort of reasoning behind their horse is thinking like a human, and I'm like, the horses don't work that way. That's not the nature of the horse. A human has a hell of a time trying to figure out how to be a human. But
Yeah.
horse does not think that way.
Yep. I'm right there with you. Right there with you.
Mhm.
Feral or spoiled? Which would you rather fool with?
Well, what do you think my answer is, Daniel?
I'm thinking feral, but
You are correct.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm on my fifth Mustang right now, and that's been a fun journey. About in January of 2000, I picked up three Mustangs out of the Rock Springs Corral, and they were all captured out of that 15-mile herd, which is between Worland and Meeteetse, Wyoming. And I've had quite the journey with those horses. I do enjoy it. It's taught me a lot about myself. It's really made me think outside the box, become really present. I've enjoyed the journey of working with the feral horses a lot. I got one out of White Mountain recently, completely different than the other ones. Has more of a defensive type nature to him, and he's been a challenge, and I'm enjoying that challenge. I'm enjoying thinking outside the box. I work with a lot of spoiled horses, and they just drive me nuts. So I would pick feral. I'd pick something that hasn't been ruined yet before I'd pick a spoiled horse.
Least favorite barn chore?
Hmm. I don't really mind any of the barn chores. I don't have a standard barn. I've got corrals with a lean-to, and there really aren't any of the chores that I don't mind doing. And especially all of those chores just help me get into my Zen mode, especially with my career and my line of work. Coming home to whether it's, pick up manure or feed or water or clean the waters or clean out the horse trailer, whatever it is. I enjoy doing all of those things to kind of get me out of thinking about work. So I enjoy them all.
Do you have a favorite barn chore?
I can't think of one that's a favorite. I can tell you the one thing I least like about being out in the corrals are flies. I've got issues with flies. We do not get along. I don't like flies in the house. I hate flies out and around. And then this time of year, flies are dumb and they're all trying to get in your eyes and they're chasing you around. And they're right now that one's flying around me right now. So I'm going to go after him here with the fly swatter. But that's the part I least like about being out in or it's not really a chore. I put up those fly bags, that's probably the one thing I dislike doing because they smell so bad. But there's not one I choose over another either. I enjoy going out and cleaning the water. All my horses check it out and they help me, and they're not helping me. They're just watching me. But I'll just hang out with them when I'm filling water troughs or going out to feed. It gives me a little bit of time to be with them and be present with them. So I guess I like those two things.
Mare, stallion, or gelding? Do you have any preference?
I don't really have a preference. I've owned some really phenomenal mares that had a lot of great heart. I currently only have geldings. Um, I don't have a preference between them. I've never owned a stallion, so I've worked with them. I've worked with stallions plenty. I've never owned my own. No, I don't have a preference. I did have a mare that had so much heart. Um, that she was a real special mare. I got her in a couple of flat horse races. I used to pick up chariot teams, and we'd have them saddle horse races afterwards. And that little mare would just give me her all, and it was just a really neat experience. I love the amount of heart she'd put into anything I asked of her. I haven't found that in the geldings I have right now at this time. Um, they haven't really wanted to give of themselves yet. We'll see what happens, but I'm on the fence. I like them both. Just depends on the horse.
Do you have any favorite words of wisdom?
Favorite words of wisdom. I think I wish I had embraced the idea of living my authentic self earlier in life. And I was a people pleaser. I was really focused on making my parents happy. And so my folks were, they helped me to go to college. I got out of college and I ended up going to work for the Forest Circus for a little bit before I went right back into horses. And they were adamant that the horse industry was not a viable industry. I needed to live in a city, make a 301, 401k or whatever. And I put a lot of weight into their opinions. And I wish I had been okay with just embracing the journey that I thought I needed to be on or felt like I was supposed to be on. So words of wisdom would be to live as your authentic self and then to allow yourself to be vulnerable. That's been another big part of my journey that I'm working on. I had a lot of issues with vulnerability, always feeling like I couldn't talk about my weaknesses or things I needed to work on. And that's been part of the journey I'm on right now, is being really open about it and becoming more accepting of being vulnerable. But I think if we allow ourselves to embrace the journey of life and embrace the weaknesses and the journeys of learning and becoming stronger and becoming better at all the things that we want to do, I think those are just important qualities that we need to embrace. So authenticity and vulnerability, both. Does that make sense? Sometimes I get all over the place. I have a hard time staying on the path.
Yep. I got it. And I guess I've only known you throughout the past year, but I can't imagine a non-authentic Sara Lowe. Like you are a broke the mold, one of a kind of a person. So.
Thank you, my friend.
Crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
I think I'd go with crunchy. I think I'd pick that over smooth. Got to have a little texture in there.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And particularly like toasted bread on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with crunchy peanut butter. Like that's another level of peanut butter and jelly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and then you could drizzle a little honey on there too. That'd be
good. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Would you tell us something unexpected about you?
Something unexpected. That's a good question. God, that just threw me for a loop. I worked in a lot of different industries. In my growing up, there was a time that I was teaching environmental education for a little while. I actually tried a career as a runway model for like a minute in college. That was not an industry for me. I was, 6 foot tall and like 135 pounds. And I was going back and forth from Laramie at the University of Wyoming down to Denver and going to these go-sees. And it was, to me, it was a way to make money. But when I saw that industry for what it was, I was just disgusted with the entire industry and the mental crisis most of those females were in, constantly being berated about, body type, size. A lot of them had eating disorders and mental health disorders, and I wanted nothing to do with that. And so I lasted just under a year, and I went to a go see. I thought at that moment in time, I thought I was pretty cool. I walked down, did my little walk and turn. I got to the end of the runway, flipped everybody off, and I drove back to Wyoming. I never went back. So
See, authentic self way back then, right?
So yeah, that was a little hiccup back in the day, but yeah, I don't think a lot of folks don't know that I attempted that for a short, small moment in time.
Thoughts or feelings?
Ooh, deep stuff. When it comes to thoughts and or feelings, I always choose the consciousness or awareness of the thoughts and feelings. So I'm on this journey right now where I am aware of the thoughts going on in my head or the emotional state that's coming up or whatever emotions are crossing me at this time, and choosing to engage or not engage with those thoughts or feelings. Because those are just products of our body. I think when our mind has a lot of energy going around in it, we get all sorts of thoughts going on, and 99% of the time they're not benefiting us. My brain tends to historically has been kind of like a hen house that's overcrowded with chickens. And so there's a whole lot of clucking going on. And it took a while for me to figure out that just wasn't benefiting me. I don't have to listen to all of those random thoughts going on in my head, and they actually are not depicting who I am. Same with the emotional states, different events, different things bring up emotional states in people. And it doesn't mean that you have to embrace them. You don't have to engage with them. You can choose to change that state. So I choose awareness over the two of them. There are times that I definitely listen to my intuition. And I would say I listen to my intuition more than I listen to my thoughts. And especially in my line of work, I've been pretty blessed to have multiple intuitive moments throughout this journey that have kept me alive. Feelings of, I come to a Y in the road, and the little voice inside, that feeling says go left, and I go left and I find a car, wrecked. There have been nights where I've felt there was a wreck somewhere and I went and found it. And there's other times that I was in the area and I couldn't find it. So there's something to be said about tapping in and tuning into your intuition and finding that discernment, because I think it can really help you out in your life journey. But I think thoughts are just, for me, in my personal experience, thoughts have not been super beneficial for me. They're just all over the place.
Are you decisive or indecisive?
I am 1000% decisively indecisive. I
Okay.
have a hell of a time. Yeah, I'm gonna really start weighing options when it comes time to making decisions. And well, what about this? But what about that? But if I do this, I don't know. Maybe I didn't think of that. So I would just say I'm indecisive, and I'm trying to be better at that.
Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse-related tool?
I think my favorite piece of tack that I own at this time would be this custom weighted saddle I had built by a dear girlfriend of mine, Misty Corlett. We've been friends for about 25 years, and She and her husband, Ash, he was featured in, I think it was New York Times or Wall Street Journal. And they did a whole article and a whole video on him teaching the Russians how to cowboy. He was over in Russia teaching the Russians how to identify different ailments in cattle and what to, what to give them for whether it was foot rot or whatever diseases they had. And they happened to move back to Wyoming, and we come across each other. Oh gosh, we met back in the Moran days when we were on the Dude String Trail years ago, and we'd come back across each other and happened to be visiting with her and said, I think it's my time in my life that I'd like to get a custom saddle. And I was doing some research about who I wanted to build that saddle. And she said, well, Sarah, I'm still building saddles. And I knew that she had learned from a dear friend of ours, Steve Meekum, up in Crowheart, Wyoming. And he is a super talented saddle builder, saddle maker. And I said, you know what? How cool would that be to have a saddle built by a friend of 25 years? So she did. She built me a saddle and gave me a family discount price. And it's just a really special saddle for me. It was really special to have something that she built. And she did a phenomenal job. Steve had helped her with the ground seat. It just feels amazing. So definitely my favorite piece of tack that I have right now.
Okay. You kind of already answered the cold showers or cold food question. So are your hands or your legs better?
My legs are definitely better. My hands, I'm still working on, well, I'm always going to be working on my hands. My legs are definitely better, and I've identified a bunch of issues that I've created in my seat over the years. When we don't ride under an educated eye for a period of time, I think especially those of us in the colt starting world, we pick up some bad habits. And I mean, we're always kind of rolling our back and sitting in there waiting for something to jump around and not get piled. And I've had a couple of major wrecks over the years that caused a bunch of issues in my back. And so I have found that my hands have kind of gone to shit, and I'm working on them. My horses are pretty responsive off my legs and my body. They're getting really light with just following that feel. If you think about and turn left, and they're going to follow you. But my hands need a lot of work, and that's something that's one of the goals I have is just keep working on my hands. I have great feel on the ground, but when I get under saddle and my body gets all cattywampus, my hands tend to go to shit. So I'm working on it.
That's very honest of you. Left lead or right lead? Do you have one that's easier and one you have to be more concentrating and paying attention to?
Left lead all day long. And the reason is back in 2000, I had a horse flip over on me and broke my pelvis. And I was still working on the Dude String Trail. And I had a couple of like bone fragments floating around, and I was getting electric shocks in my seat bones. I mean, it was horrible. And I didn't have insurance at that time. So I had to ride for the next year and a half in a gel seat. You try riding around a bunch of cowboys in a gel seat, you're going to be the butt of every laugh or every joke. But I had to because I had a job to do. And
the gel butt of every joke.
But I had to because I was getting these electric shocks. I'm riding along and little pieces of cartilage or whatever was loose in there were just nailing me. So you'd be riding and it was like someone sticking an outlet in your rear end. So, it wasn't real fun, but it healed with that left hip forward. So left leads all day long. I can pick them up. I really have to be conscious about my right leads, and I'm doing a lot of work on myself biomechanically. I've noticed a lot of issues that I'm having through my rib cage, my hips, and the tightness in my hips and my hip joints. So over the last year and a half, 2 years, where I became more conscious of that, I'm doing a lot of work to help myself be a more balanced rider, and loosening up those hips so I can ride even and centered. So I'd like to be even not rightly dominant, but even in the future. But at this time, I'm still left lead all day long. Trying to get that right leg ahead of me is difficult.
Do you know if you are right or left footed? So if I pitched a soccer ball out on the grass and I said, go kick that as far as you can, which foot would you kick it with?
I think I'd kick it with my right.
Okay. Well, and then you
Yeah.
got the pelvis thing you were just talking about, but I'm trying to do a little informal research project on this. If right dominant foot equals left dominant lead, because
Hmm.
that kind of makes sense. So, um, I've,
In your research with that, look at eye and hand dominance too, because there's a
mhm,
lot to do with like the eye hand dominance, especially when it comes to shooting in law
mhm.
enforcement. I've always been right hand, left eye dominant, and they've all been trying to get me to shoot left-handed, which I feel super off trying to shoot left-handed, but it's something I'm trying to work on, see if I can get that stuff put together.
Mhm. So I'm a gun guy. You may not know this about me, but I'm a certified BB gun range master. And I
Wow.
also teach hunter's education for wildlife and fisheries here in Louisiana. So
Oh, that's
I've
fantastic.
worked with a whole bunch of little kids on learning how to shoot and eye dominance, that kind of
Nice.
stuff a lot. So
So what
um,
caliber do you shoot an alligator with?
mostly a 22 rimfire, believe it or not.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, that's what they're because they don't want to damage the hide. And particularly on an alligator, you're shooting them in the top of the head for the most part. Their brain's about the size of a golf ball, but the belly is the really expensive part of the leather. So you don't want
Okay.
something that's gonna blow out the throat or the belly, chest area, and all of that. So yeah, little 22 is all they use.
I learned
And
something new
then,
today.
yeah, then they duct tape their mouth shut when they bring them in the boat because sometimes you didn't quite really destroy the brain. You kind of grazed the brain and knocked them out. You do not want a live gator in your boat with a mouth that works. So you learn that lesson the hard way. Little fun fact for y'all
Well,
there.
I'm glad that we don't need to do that with the rattlesnakes because I wouldn't want to duct tape their mouth shut, but we just chop their heads off so they don't keep trying to bite you
Yeah.
after you whack them because they can still have that reflex for a
Uh-huh.
while.
Yes, ma'am. What is the best smell in the barn?
Oh, best smell is horses. It's always going to be horses. That I'll come home from a day of work and just have a stressful day on the street and just bury my nose in my horses. And there's something very calming about that. Definitely the horses.
Somebody needs to come up with a candle, right?
Mhm.
Sweet, salty, or spicy?
I'd say salty. I'm not a big sweets person. And while I like some spicy things, the other end of me doesn't so much. So I'll stick with the salty. TMI,
Uh,
TMI.
no, it's hey, Jill padded saddles. That's all you need, right?
Right? Yeah, I like my salty stuff. So that's what I would go for.
What is your favorite dinosaur or deep sea creature? And you're actually up there in
Mm.
fossil land, I'm imagining, so you may have a little different take on this than the rest of us.
There,
So,
there are they find dinosaurs all over out here. Um, as a child, I think my favorite was always that Triceratops because I would ride one of them.
ab-
Absolutely, I would ride one of them.
yep.
I've got a bunch of pictures on my Facebook of me riding various dinosaurs when I was in Australia. I don't know if we were supposed to, but there were a whole bunch of them at the zoo I went to, and I climbed on top of each one of them, and I was just raking and spurring. I had a blast on all them dinosaurs. I even jumped on a great white shark. Speaking of, those are my least favorite deep sea animals. And I actually I've told my folks this story, and I don't know that there's truth to it, but when we were children, my mother took my brother and I to see Jaws in Long Island, and we saw it in the theater. And both of my parents are marine biologists. So after watching the original Jaws, she thought it was a good idea to take her children to the ocean and it's evening, it's like nighttime. And we were going to look for bioluminescent ctenophores. So there are
Mm-hmm.
There are those jellyfish that glow in the dark, and then there's those bioluminescent diatoms on the beach where you can move your hand on the sand and they kind of glitter and glow. And so we're splashing around in the water, and I happen to step on an eel. And I'll tell you what, from that point on, I have the worst PTSD, and I moved to Wyoming, and I got as far away from that damn ocean as I could because I don't like them great white sharks. They scare me. I'd rather take on a grizzly bear all day long than a great white shark.
It's kind of funny, and I'll say this, like among the law enforcement and military people that I know, almost all of them would have no problem running straight into gunfire, but there's gonna be a phobia. They're gonna be deathly afraid of spiders, or something in there is gonna be like all of their fear gets concentrated in that one little odd phobia versus, the things most other people would be scared of. I think that's hilarious. My best friend is terrified of spiders, and we've gone out into the woods to play paintball. I don't know if you've ever done that, but that's actually a hell of a blast. Not on a course, just out in the woods. We're hunting each other for legit. And I always know right where he is, because in the woods in Louisiana, we have these big banana spiders that make these huge nests. And every time he comes across one, oh, I get to hear him scream. I'm like, oh, okay, he's right over there. So now I can flake him. Thank you, Mr. Spider.
I would be
Good
curious
times.
to do a study on law enforcement officers terrified of spiders, because just in my department alone, I have a large percentage of officers that are terrified of spiders and bugs in general, but primarily spiders. And oftentimes I'm in the office when I'm not tasing them, daddy long legs, I'm catching them and I'm putting them outside and saving them. But I'm going to admit there's been a time or two or 10 where I have captured those spiders in my hand and I have chased my coworkers around with them, and they scream like little girls, and it's hysterical because it's not going to do anything to you. It doesn't make any sense to me, but they are. I have a majority of my coworkers are terrified of spiders, which that's the last thing I'd be scared of.
When I was a teenager, I worked on a farm for a buddy of mine's dad during the summers. And their kind of main farmhand that had been working there 20 years was a guy named Pop. And Pop was a real good guy. I liked him a lot, and to the point where we were kind of messing with each other and all. And he was terrified of snakes like that. And one day I'm out in the barnyard, and I don't even remember what it was. It was a non-venomous little garter snake or king snake or something like that. And I caught it, and I put it in a bag I had found in the shop, and I wrote on it with a Sharpie, "Parts for Pop," for his tractor. And I just put it up there on the counter, and it went like 3 days and he never had gone in there and found them. And so finally I'm like, okay, well, the snake's going to die if I just leave him in there. So I go to, and when that is when he walks through the door and he sees me with the bag with his name on it. And he's like, well, what is that? I said, well, this is a little prank I set up for you a few days ago. And I showed him and he was not amused. He didn't find that funny at all. He probably didn't talk to me for like a week after that. Like it changed our relationship. He was not amused that I had set him up with this snake at all.
You know,
Anyway.
someone told me years ago that you could snap a rattlesnake's neck if you grab it by the tail and you snap it like a bullwhip. You can snap their neck. I tried that. It didn't work. It sure as heck doesn't work. Years ago when I was in Oregon, I'd come across, I called it the rattleaconda. It was this rattlesnake size of an anaconda. At least in my eyes it was. And I had been telling my ex-husband about this snake, and this is the biggest darn snake I've ever seen. He's like, yeah, sure. So I grabbed a bunch of rocks and I was throwing them at this snake, and I finally got it stopped, and I was pretty sure it was deceased, and I ran back to the house and was like, we got to go get this snake, this rattleaconda, biggest snake I ever saw. And so we ride back out there, and he says, dang, that's a really big snake. That's probably the biggest rattlesnake I ever seen. But how come there's a big pile of rocks way over there on the left and another big pile over to the right, and then there's a dead snake way over to this other direction? I said, apparently I missed a whole lot. I was just throwing rocks every which direction, and apparently a few of them hit him, not very many, but I did get him stopped, and I got him captured and put him in a bucket and brought him home and skinned him. And I kept hearing about, rattlesnake tastes good, tastes like chicken. I'm like, I'm going to try that. So I cut its head off and skinned that thing and kept it in that bucket. And that bucket, it kept moving for 24 hours. That snake kept slithering around that bucket. That creeped me out so bad that I couldn't eat the snake. It wouldn't stop moving.
You can even, once they stop, say a day or two in the fridge, clean it all. When you get to meat, you sprinkle some salt on them and it'll start making them move again. Frog legs will do the same thing. They can jump out of the pan when you start cooking them. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I know that. I'm not going to try that again.
Simple nervous systems. Yeah, you can. It's weird. It'll creep you out if you don't know what's going on, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
I have not personally had a UFO encounter, and I think if I did, I'd run and scream like a little girl. I do know an old cowboy that I trust pretty well, that I've known for years. He shares a story of being out in the wilderness and running into some big ship come down and had some big light on him and his horse, and he was number one, frozen in his place, frozen in his spot, looking at this craft. And he says, Sara, I had my 45 and I kept shooting at it because I'd be damned if the aliens were going to steal my best horse. And he says he doesn't believe he hit the craft, but it eventually, went back up and flew away. He's adamant that is what he saw, and he's not a person that I know to be an exaggerator or a liar. So I took that as a grain of salt, and I think it's small-minded to think we're the only, advanced species, as complicated as we are in the whole universe. I think there's probably something else out there. But when it comes to paranormal, I've seen a lot of stuff over the years. I mean, I'm a 16-year cop, and I've worked nights a lot. And I have seen some stuff that is terrifying. And one of them, I don't remember if I told you that down in Cortez, Colorado or not, but I did witness a full-blown demonic possession, and it scared the shit out of me. And I had called my folks the next day and said, I cannot articulate what I experienced. It was terrifying. And these days I'm pretty much on day shift. I choose to I don't really want to be back on nights. So there's just stuff out here. There's stuff you don't want to see. And there's a lot of paranormal stuff out there, and I know that I've seen it. And it wasn't a trick of the mind. It wasn't something else. There were quite a few of us that have experienced some of these things together, and we've all seen them. So there's stuff out there that we cannot explain.
That's fair enough. Let me do it. That was the last question. So let me tabulate up your score here. A little arithmetic going. Oh, I might have to take a shoe off for this one, Sara. You did good. You got 4,290 points, which is a high score of all time on this game, which entitles you to either an awkward silence or a genuine compliment, your choice.
All day long, I will pick the awkward silence.
It's satisfying each and every time. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
I love it.
Well, why don't you give us kind of the 30,000 foot view of what it is that you do? And we'll say within the horse business. We'll talk about your law enforcement stuff separately, but within the horse world, what is it that you do?
Now, the 30,000 foot view, that's the short view, right?
Yes.
The 30,000 foot view would be, in the horse industry, I am a mounted enforcement instructor through the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy. Occasionally, it used to be annually, but now occasionally I teach a 40-hour post-certified, that's peace officer standardized training class for certifying horses to be used in mounted patrol. But these days we have a shortage of law enforcement officers, and at least in our agency, we have a shortage of folks with horses. So haven't done it this year or last year. In my personal business, I have Sagebrush training, And that's where that's the company I run my clinics out of. My clinics are called the Confidence Course. And it all started from using my mounted patrol clinics and allowing civilians in there, but it organically grew into what it is now, where I'm using obstacles to pretty much give the riders a job to do with their horses. I'd say 99.9% of my clientele is middle-aged women. Most of them have some fear issues, some issues that have come up in their life, whether it's horse related or something in their world. They have some fear, some anxieties. And so I'm using those obstacles no different than you'd use a cow in a clinic, and give them an idea and an intention where they're working on their communication with their horse and trying to get a job done. So they are not desensitizing clinics. Can't stand that word. It is specifically just a really fun obstacle clinic. When I show up with my trailer full of stuff, it looks like the circus threw up. I've got all sorts of crazy stuff that I bring. And, it gives them tasks to do. A lot of the time they're bringing in new horses that they might have just purchased. They're wanting to see what they can and can't do with this horse. And then I give them a whole lot of techniques and things that have worked for me to overcome fear and anxiety issues. And so we're working on getting present. I think I told you, well, we shared this about having an ego bucket. And when they first arrive at the clinics, I've got that ego bucket right at the gate. We have a conversation about what the ego is and then dropping it into that bucket. And then focusing on that present moment while they're in that space for the 2-day clinic. So just doing fun stuff with your horse, working on yourself. I'd say 95% of what we're doing is working on the human, and then just giving them some fun stuff to do with their horse.
That sounds fair enough. Yeah, I have a mailbox at the arena, and the mailbox is where you put your bullshit, your fears, all your past experiences. I like that symbolism a lot myself.
Yeah.
Well, let's get full on into the obstacles. So, which what's the chicken or the egg with that? So you've been a certified riding instructor for a long time, and then you started doing the mounted patrol. So were you using these obstacles this way from the mounted patrol stuff, and then the clinics evolved, or did the clinics influence the mounted patrol stuff? What kind of was the beginning of that for you?
In what I'm doing now, the mounted patrol influenced the clinics. When I was in Oregon and I was training the gaited horses, I ended up leaving the outfit I was working for and had opened up my own training business. And I was starting colts in that Rogue River Valley outside of Medford, Oregon. And there's just not a lot of colt starters in that country. And so I was starting colts. I was giving riding lessons. That's when I had that magazine company. And there were a lot of trainers in that area because it's a pretty big, reining horse community. And I think most folks are wanting to be the finishers and the folks that go to the shows. And I was trying to make a name for myself. So I was taking in pretty much everything that someone would bring me, which I think most colt starters probably do in the beginning until they get a little bit smarter and start setting up some boundaries about what you will and won't take, or because sometimes you get a lot of trash. I got some stuff that was just flat plumb dangerous, but so I had the horsemanship part in the beginning. Then when the economy crashed in 2008, I had shut down the magazine company and my training business. I'd gotten divorced and moved back to Wyoming. And just for the record, they haven't found the body in Oregon yet, but I know where to hide stuff. But anyway, no, he is alive and well. Anyway, I moved back to Wyoming, and I had the best job ever. This is kind of going off topic, but I had the best job working for the Wyoming Livestock Board. And I was traveling around the state, bleeding cattle for brucellosis. And I actually got to capture and bleed elk on New Year's Eve at Fossil Butte National Monument years ago. I wrote some cowboy poetry about that. It was a lot of fun. And that position was grant funded. The money ran out. So I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? And so I opened up the newspaper, and There were two jobs in there. There was a city police officer or detox. I didn't know what detox was. I'd never been there before. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll try to be a cop. And prior to that, when I was up in the Du Bois country, I was on the ambulance and search and rescue. So I'd worked around law enforcement officers quite a bit. And I knew I had a pretty level head when it came to chaotic situations and solving people problems. So I thought, why not? So I went and tested, and it is a lengthy test in order to become a police officer. And so I had to do a physical test and a run, and I had to do an oral board, and then you have to submit your application. You have to do all these different tests. And they do a long background check before they decide if you're going to get hired on. So it was like a 4-month, 5-month process before I finally got the call to get hired on. So I started that career in law enforcement, and I think it was a second year in, another guy in that agency decided, hey, let's do a mounted patrol unit. So there were quite a few of us that rode, and we had a sergeant out of Jackson, Wyoming, came over to our agency, and he'd put on a couple mounted patrol clinics where each year we'd get certified, and we'd get certified with our personal horses. And then we would use them for like fair. It's Wyoming. So people always think of, cowboys, horses. We're using horses to do stuff. And so it was kind of a PR move, public relations for our agency. We were in parades, whether it was a fair parade or we have a variety of parades that they do locally. So we would get in the parades and folks could see their local law enforcement officers riding. We'd go down to the fair each year and, visit with kids, and we'd use the horses to get us around the fairgrounds if you had a drunk that showed up or some sort of an issue, a missing child, a missing parent. We would use the horses to be able to go out and look for folks. And I think it was after the first or second year that we were getting certified that that sergeant came over and certified 3 of us as mounted enforcement instructors. So then we had our certification to be able to teach those classes. And so we continued doing mounted enforcement at the police department. And in 2015, I made a decision to leave the municipal police department, and I moved over to our local sheriff's office. They've been trying to recruit me for quite some time. I had a lieutenant that had showed up at my house 3 times, I think it was, begging me to come work for the sheriff's office. And change is always scary, especially when you're in an established place. And I've been there for 6.5 years. It was a tough jump. It was definitely a tough jump, and it was the best jump I ever made. Since then, we've scalped a lot of officers from that police department and brought them over to the sheriff's office, and they're all very happy about having made that decision. But so when I went to the sheriff's office, I decided to start our own mounted enforcement group through the sheriff's office. And my mounted enforcement clinics organically grew again, where the traditional mounted enforcement clinics are, they're more city-based, like you would think probably in like Louisiana or New York City, where you're using horses for vehicle extractions, for crowd control. We don't use that, especially not the sheriff's office. So I had manipulated our clinics to incorporate more search and rescue. And that's what the sheriff's office is more inclined to do. Our county is the 14th largest county in the US, and we're just under 10,000 square miles. And this is an area that's mountainous. There's a lot of climbers that go up to like Gannett Peak, that go up back in the backcountry and get lost. There's a lot of reasons to use horses for search and rescue. And having law enforcement officers working in conjunction with civilians is extremely handy. We've had some cold cases that I've used our horse team for, where if you have a certified officer with civilians, they all help you with your grid pattern. And as you're out there gridding with GPS units on you, if you find items of evidence the line will stop. Someone can say, I found something. They'll let the certified person know, and that certified person's in charge of collecting that evidence because they have the proper training to gather what evidence they find. If it's, you're searching for a homicide victim or you're searching for a whatever the situation is. So it was through my mounted patrol that I had a lot of civilians that were interested in those clinics. And I think the first one I did was more focused on just the mounted enforcement part of it with civilians. And then it just gradually grew into what it is now. And part of that, I think, came from when I first took the original clinics with the sergeant from Jackson. I'll just be honest, I ruined one of my horses that I brought through one of those clinics. They were throwing so much stimulation at these horses that, we were in indoor arenas throwing smoke bombs and fireworks, and you end up with a horse that's just inside out. And so I wanted to incorporate a lot more of the horsemanship into the clinic atmosphere itself. And I think that's how the confidence course kind of grew. So I started blending the horsemanship into mounted enforcement. And then it grew into what my client base needed. There was a niche for it. I think there's a ton of folks out there doing clinics, and there's a ton of amazing clinicians out there. But as far as a clinic atmosphere, that's like a safe atmosphere where you're really working on humans and you're working on the human mindset while doing something fun, which is the obstacles. There's a lot of really fun obstacles. It just gradually grew into what it is now. So, like I said before, it's mostly working on the human, but then using those mounted patrol obstacles to get jobs done. So that was all over the place again.
No, I'm kind of curious. So I'm just imagining, and those of you who don't know Sara, I think I know Sara well enough to be able to say this. Her nickname for herself is Sasquatch. Sara's, like she said, she's a over 6 feet tall. I'm a pretty good sized guy, and I'm looking up at Sara. So, so I'm curious because you're out there in Wyoming. I'm imagining most of your sheriff's deputies and people you've had in these clinics have ridden horses before. And so do you get any like pushback on, oh, hell, I know more about this than you do, or any of that kind of stuff? Or does the hierarchy of detective make that all clear? Have you, because I'm just imagining that might not be the smoothest of roads there when you've got a group that assumes they already know. So am I wrong or what?
I haven't had that experience. I could see where that would come in. And I would imagine probably in other or in other mounted enforcement clinics, there's probably other clinicians that have experienced that. I have not, even as a female clinician, female law enforcement officer, I just haven't had a lot of pushback, I guess, of let's do it this way. I know what I'm doing. I did have one experience with an officer that wasn't as horse savvy, who had he was one of those type A personalities that he was trained to do something. He was trained in the original amount of enforcement clinic that we were all trained in, that you do it like this. You do it from A to Z and you don't deviate from that. And I had stopped into one of his clinics, and he was running into some issues with horses that were pretty strong in their shoulders, where a lot of ground respect issues and pushing into your space. And he was trying to assist the officer with moving that horse's shoulders away and doing some hindquarter disengagement. And he kind of overdid the hindquarter disengagement, as well as just having your horse yield to pressure. And he saw me standing there watching his clinic, and he goes, "Can you help out for a sec?" And so I jumped in, and I had a flag in my vehicle. I use them for when I'm running cattle down the road and stuff. And so I grabbed a flag, which is an extension of my arm, and was helping just create a little bit more energy to move that horse away from me. And he stops. He's like, "We weren't trained with flags. We're not using flags." Wait, what? So because he did not have that experience, And he thought you could only train A through Z, therefore we can't bring in another tool to get the job done. So I think that was the only experience where I had someone, and he just wasn't as knowledgeable of a horseman, but he was really resistant to adding another tool to get a job done. But in my clinics, I've had just wonderful feedback, and they're very open too. So I'm always listening for criticism or suggestions. And, if folks think there's a better way to get something done, we can try that out. And if it works, it does. If it doesn't, then we'll disregard it. But I haven't had a whole lot of pushback. And I think most of the folks that have come through, they're fairly horse savvy. They can get around their horse. I've had a few officers come in with a borrowed horse or a spouse's horse. And there have been a few that were pretty darn green, had trouble saddling, might be okay at walk trots, but when it comes to lope, everything goes to shit. So we work through that basic horsemanship part of it so that they can get their job done safely.
So I'm kind of curious, and this may be an unfair question because what I'm thinking about is more the crowd control side of things, and like we've got parades and festivals and stuff, and that's where horses are used a lot down here. We also have, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Angola prison, the maximum security prison down here in Louisiana, is kind of famous. They have the big prison rodeo, but they also have their own breeding program for horses, which are half draft, half quarter horse. I think they're Percheron. So they kind of wind up with these big, cold, blocky horses, and a lot of the sheriff's departments are fighting to get their hands on some of these big. They're all dark bay or black, and they got that presence. You're definitely looking way up at the cop sitting on this 1,400-pound beast's back. But like, they're going to train these horses to pin a drunk up against the wall and hold him there, and these are things that most of us probably wouldn't do. So I'm just curious if you have any opinion on having more dominant minded type horses in that realm, or whether you don't really feel that matters, because you kind of have to have the blend. Like a 6-year-old's got to be able to accidentally walk into the butt of that horse and not get kicked at a parade. Absolutely. But then you got to pin the drunk that may be fighting back too. So what do you think about that?
It takes a special type of horse to get that job done. And there have been several horses that have come through the clinics that did not get certified, that just weren't ready at that time and may never be ready. You do need to have kind of some of that draft cold blood, that little bit less reactive horse that's not going to jump on top of someone when you're trying to pin them and arrest them. We do a lot of the arrest techniques in the clinics, in the mounted enforcement clinics. And I do know a few folks that have used it and arrested folks at fairs, intoxicated individuals that were flailing about, and were able to get them cuffed up and end up taking them over to a marked unit where they could put that arrested individual in there. I get a little bit of every size type of horse in these clinics. So we don't have because everyone's using their personal horses. So they're bringing what they have available to them at that time. And there's times where if a horse isn't going to work out, they're going to have to go find something else to bring to a future clinic that might be a more suitable mount. But you do want a horse that has a pretty level head, that is willing to take on those more chaotic situations, because you're right. We've been to the park before where you have, some drunk guy walks up and, hey, I grew up riding horses, and they want to, grab a rein or try to jump on behind you. And you've got to know those techniques to be able to bump them out of the way, use that hindquarter and shove them out of the way so they don't jump on your horse, or be able to block their hands from grabbing your reins or your bridle. And you need a horse that's going to allow you to, shove that guy out of the way so he's not trying to jump up on that horse. So you're definitely evaluating that horse and that horse's mentality to make sure that they're going to be suitable for the job. But like I said, with the sheriff's office, we're doing more of that search and rescue stuff. And some parades, if there's something that comes up, we'll definitely get in there. So it's not as critical for my agency. With my agency, I need horses that they're going to be solid in the mountains. They're going to be sure-footed and help to get a job done on it'll be a long trek going in to search for someone that might have fallen off a mountain. Or our most recent search was we went and looked for a guy. It's a cold case where he drove down a 2-track dirt road, got a vehicle stuck, and then just disappeared. Now, it could have been aliens. I don't know. We still haven't found him, but
I was about to say, yep.
But it's been a couple of years. When they found the vehicle, it was a Civil Air Patrol or Life Flight. It was an aircraft that was flying over that found that vehicle, and it was probably 2 weeks after he went missing. And we'd had some weather in between in that 2-week period that had washed away a lot of the footprints. And of course, there's all sorts of speculation about, did someone take this guy's truck and drive it to the location? Did he actually end up there? And he was an older man with some medical issues. We do know for a fact that he ended up at that scene, and he had to go to the bathroom, and we were able to do some DNA testing to confirm that he was on scene, and he disappeared from that scene. And so the horses were really critical. It was a critical piece of that search, because you have, ground crews, and you have walkers, you have people on 4-wheelers. We had drones. We had a little bit of everything. And this area that we were covering was mountainous, but then it had very tall sagebrush. And so the horses come in so handy because you're riding above that sagebrush and you're able to look down. But to this day, we still haven't found him. We've done all sorts of different grids on that area, and I'm sure we'll go back out again in the future. And we actually had some conversations this year about going out next spring. We'll see if that happens or not. But for what I need them for in my job and in my agency, it's more of the sure-footed mountain horse that's not going to buck somebody off so that they can get their job done. We're not doing as much of the arrest technique stuff for the sheriff's office.
So this may be a little bit morbid, but this may not be the kind of thing that's common knowledge, but horses do not handle the smell of death very well. If you're like checking cattle and you come upon a cow that's been dead 2 or 3 days, or you kill an elk or something, it's not just any horse that's going to be cool with that. They'll generally not want to get within 100 feet of something like that. They'll smell it and all. So do y'all work with the smell of decomp? Do you bring something and deal with that in the certification process, or not necessarily?
I have hides. I have various wildlife hides, as far as I used to guide hunters years ago, and the first time a horse packs out an animal, oftentimes they'll have issues with that smell. And a bunch of the old outfitters I've worked with and around talk about blood in their nose. So you dip your fingers in the blood of the animal and stick it in their nose to kind of override those olfactory receptors. And that tends to work for packing out animals. Now, we're not going to do that with a human. That would be disgusting. But I haven't done anything as far as bringing in a scent of decomp. We've worked in the field around decomposing wildlife, and we'll use techniques of, circling, switching eyes, riding up to, and that horse, over a period of time, that horse does become more accepting of getting closer to that, whatever it is. In one of my clinics, we practiced packing out a body. I had them go out and search for a missing person, and I had a dummy, and we ended up locating the dummy and then packed him out on a pack horse. And that's something that we could use in the future with accessing some of these more remote areas. Most of the time we use helicopters, but there could potentially be a time where we have to use horses to pack somebody out. And our sheriff and undersheriff is good with that. So that's a technique that we're using. But as far as to overcome the smell, I haven't come up with a way to overcome the smell of human decomposition, because that is definitely a unique smell. But we could use like essential oils, things like that, which They don't recommend in humans. I do a lot of autopsies as a detective, and I've been told that on my first couple autopsies, I would always bring in little vials of essential oils like lemongrass or peppermint, because I had been told that some people use Vicks, and I've also been told that doesn't work. So I have used essential oils for me, but some of the coroners advised me that that's not a good idea because the human brain will make associations with those smells. And so further down the road, you're going to come across like lemon, and you're going to have some sort of, post-traumatic stress response to that scent of lemon because it was in your nose when you were doing an autopsy. So I don't know, if a horse, I don't think a horse would make an association between the two smells. But I think there's probably something you could do to override those olfactory senses. But if someone has an idea of how to, get a horse, I guess that would be the word, is desensitized to the smell of human decomposition, I would be all ears to hearing some suggestions.
That is interesting.
As long as it's not coming from serial killers.
Well, you mentioned earlier about not liking the word desensitizing, and I'm right there with you. So why don't we unpack that a little bit? What are your thoughts on desensitizing? What it is, what it isn't, where we get that thought wrong, and all?
So in the beginning of my clinics, because I think the term desensitizing is just so overused, number one. And I think a lot of folks are out there trying to desensitize their horses to everything under the sun. In the beginning of my clinics, I always tell everyone this is not a desensitizing clinic. The only thing I want my horse desensitized to is the feel of that saddle. So it's no different than you put your jeans on out of the dryer first thing in the morning and you feel them as they go up your legs. By the end of the day, you no longer feel those jeans. You got your starched jeans, they go on, you feel every square inch in the first thing in the morning. As the day goes on, you completely forget you're wearing them. I want my horse desensitized to the feel of that saddle. And so that the saddle isn't meaning anything as far as the weight on his back and wrapped around that rear cinch, that front cinch, that breast collar, that's not something that's troublesome. The only other area on my horse I would want desensitized is that airspace above where the saddle is. So if you're talking with your hands or you're switching left eye, right eye, that's not going to mean anything, and they're just not reactive to that. But I want a sensitive horse. I want something that, as we all know, they can feel a fly land on them. So they're going to feel every little thing. I want all of those feels to mean something. So you wouldn't want your horse to be desensitized. I also tell my folks that you're never going to desensitize your animal to every pink pool noodle, blue flag, whatever it is that you're trying to desensitize them to. There's always going to be something else. So why not make a horse that's responsive, create or mold a horse that's responsive, that he's seeking of you and trusting of you when he's in these new situations, rather than, oh, it's another, there's a pink pool noodle. They've rubbed that all over me, so I'm no longer afraid of pink pool noodles. It just doesn't work that way. I want a horse that's sensitive. So the only thing to desensitize them to is, again, that saddle and that airspace above their body. On my colts, I'm still leading them by the foot with a rope. I'm swinging a rope over them in the beginning and looking for them to be accepting, first standing still and accepting, then moving. I think a lot of folks will desensitize them standing still, and then as soon as they get some movement, the horse just reverts back to being, upset and bothered about something moving around up on top of that body. So with my colt clinics, which is just the confidence course on the ground, the whole thing with colts, we'll throw some stuff over them, have them become accepting standing still, and then become accepting while they're moving, getting sent around in a circle, but we're still controlling, hips and shoulders and switching directions and stuff like that. So I think it's an overused term, and I don't think we need to desensitize our horses to everything under the sun.
I just did a happenstance video a couple of days ago. I was out in the pasture with a chainsaw cutting down a bunch of little scrub trees that are taking over the place. And I'm running a chainsaw, so I'm paying attention to what I'm doing. And here before long, I look over my shoulder and I've got the whole herd, 16, 20 horses, whatever I have out there right now. They're 50 feet behind me checking out what's going on.
Yeah.
And so I start paying attention a little bit, and I go cut a couple more trees, and I look down. Now they're 20 feet away. They're coming. Curiosity is peaked, checking it out. So I did a little video on that because whenever we get 4th of July and New Year's, you'll have this rash of Facebook posts of, y'all gotta stop popping fireworks. I can't sleep at night because my horses are gonna kind of that's not them, that's you. You're just not handling stuff right. And
Right.
so the way that I look at it is the desensitizing is not about removing fear in a horse. It is about making a horse braver, and those
Yeah,
are not the same thing. And
absolutely.
so that's kind of the way that I look at it. Like you're talking about pink pool noodle. I see people, this is partly clinicians' fault too, because they like to sell you shit that's got their logo on it and you pay 4 times retail for it and all that. And so you get this $80 stick that is a special stick. It's been balanced and blessed by monks or whatever the hell's going on there. And you wind up using that stick or that flag or whatever, and it's kind of the only thing you do. And my thought on that is I would rather show a horse 50 different things twice than the same two things 50 times,
Mhm.
because the two things, that's desensitizing. That is a specific stimulus, a specific trigger that you are trying to unwire. But 50 things twice, that is making the horse braver and where it can handle whatever may happen. I've never been out in the woods riding and come across a clown on a hilltop with a flag. That is
Right.
not the reality of what I'm trying to survive here. It is about making them braver. So,
Absolutely. And
uh,
that's what with those clinics I have things that they go through over, things that have movement, things that have sound. And it's not about that specific obstacle, but it's about how you're riding and guiding that horse, because you're going to come across something when you're out, riding out in the pasture or riding on the trail, and you're going to have a similar scenario with there is something the horse is concerned about. So what are you going to do? Are you going to keep that horse between your hands and your legs and ride them through and over? If your horse is bothered, here are some techniques to get you closer and closer and get that horse more accepting, and then going over and rewarding for the slightest try, fixing and adjusting yourself so that the horse can conquer whatever it is that you're doing. So it has nothing to do with, bubbles and pool noodles and all that kind of stuff. It's just all of those techniques that you would use in a controlled environment, you can then use out in the field as well.
mhm. And I really liked what you said about people doing all of this stuff when the horse is standing still. There's a big difference between you sitting on a horse that's standing still and a rabbit jumps out 10 feet away, and you being on a horse at a long trot and a rabbit jumps out 10
Exactly.
feet away. That horse that's
Absolutely.
already got some momentum is going to have a much bigger reaction. And I do think people tend to, they feel safe doing that stuff on the ground, and then they do not carry it forward into the saddle where it's actually going to save your life at some point in time, because that's when you're vulnerable, and that's when that horse needs to stay under control and not lose their mind if and
Yeah,
when. um,
100%.
so you got the name confidence course. When you're doing that, you mentioned you're kind of working more with the people. So is the confidence in that confident rider, or is that building confidence in the horse, or are you trickier about it than just those two simple answers, or what?
My goal is to create a more confident human so that the horse then becomes more courageous. So I find that the more confident the human is and what they're doing and how they're communicating with that horse is going to become more courageous in the attempts at all this new stuff that they're getting exposed to. So once that horse becomes more courageous, I think the horse becomes more confident too afterwards as well. But it's primarily working on that confidence in the human so that they can therefore help that horse to become more courageous in new situations. So you're working on both, but you're primarily in my clinics, we're working on the human, and then you're getting a direct response, or you're enhancing that courage in the horse. That's just a byproduct of a confident human.
I agree. I find, I've done the colt thing for a long, long time, and I think I have pretty good success with riders and all, but I'll definitely say as my skill level got more and more refined, the average person had a harder time riding behind me because the feel of what they were offering that horse was, more and more different from what I was offering that horse. And I've seen that a lot where one person can get on a horse and have one response. You put a different person on the same horse, you have a very different response. I've started looking at it as people learning to build rapport with their horse. And there's, again, I've seen enough times where if I'm doing a demo or something, you'll have someone that will have a problem with a horse they've had for 2 years. And then they bring them in there and I'll just dink around with the horse while I'm talking for a couple of minutes, and then I can't replicate the problem. And the problem didn't have to exist for 2 years. You just had to kind of get things lined up right with the horse, and then it melts away. I can't tell you, I've had a lot of people that come here for lessons and they trailer in and they unload the horse. And as they're trying to talk to me and tell me about the horse and get saddled, well, the horse's attention is everywhere but on them, and he's grazing. I'm like, hey, whoa, stop. And, like you gotta deal with this. Like, you can't just, there's not a blank slate here in a minute. Like, you're training the horse right now. And so we deal with that kind of stuff. And once again, it may be embarrassing that we've had horses for 20 years and you just got a leading lesson in the parking lot, but then they get into the arena, and once again, the problem they came here to work on now isn't there anymore. The mechanic, you can't make your car make that noise anymore, right? And it really wasn't the problem was not what they thought the problem was. So
100%. I love that you said that too. One of the exercises I have these guys do in the clinics, number one, what the very first thing we do is I have them stand and they've got to back their horse up to the end of the lead rope and then bring it forward and back it up, and it's pressure and release. But it's also being aware of that personal space bubble. And then I'll have them walk, and they've got to walk around. I always tell them in the morning, wear your walking shoes, because they're walking on the ground. I got to keep that horse behind him. And we talk about every single time you hold and you touch that horse, every single time you're teaching them something, whether it's good or bad. And you've got to be the one that's aware of what you're teaching your horse. And you just wouldn't believe, 80% of the folks that come in, they'll be leading around the indoor or outdoor, the arena, whatever it is. And I'll have them keeping their horse behind them, a couple feet. And they're just not aware that when they stop their feet, I want their horse to stop their feet. If they're walking slow, I want the horse to walk slow. They speed up their feet, the horse should speed up their feet. But they'll stop, and then they'll get to gawking off, and that horse is now crowded right back up in their space, pushing them over, hunting candy in their pockets. And I'm like, are you aware of what's going on right now in this very moment? I mean, this is your responsibility to be so aware of what that horse is doing, every moment that you're touching that horse. And it can be an eye opener when you point it out, like, oh, look, again, your horse, old Diamond, is now walking over the top of you yet again. You got to be aware, get him out of your space. But they just, they aren't aware of that stuff. And it presents in so many different ways later on too. Yeah,
if you're having that experience leading him around, then probably not about to be good when you get up in that saddle either, is it?
100%, 100%. So Daniel, I got a question for you. What sparked your interest in to start doing podcasts?
So Maddie is really kind of the first part of that. She originally just found my bit video out of the blue and did a review on it, and then contacted me and wanted to have me on their podcast. And I had podcasts weren't on my radar at all at that point in time. And so I did it, and I was like, this is a pretty cool medium and way of doing things. And that was still during COVID type times and all of that stuff. And so it also introduced me to Zoom, and it just kind of opened a whole new world. And I thought, what the hell, I'll try this. And it took a little while to kind of find my feet in it, like the longer form deal. I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but I think it works well for me, and I enjoy that we can get into more in depth in some of these conversations than what most of the other stuff that's out there is. And then also some of the people that I talk with are pretty popular and pretty well known, and everybody's heard them with their basic spiel. So by the time we're an hour and a half in, I've run them past all of that, and now they have to start thinking on their feet and getting a little more candid and a little more real about it. And I really like that. I think that's where the conversation really starts. So, anyway, this is just part of what we do now.
Interviewed some phenomenal folks. I mean, that I listened to quite a few of your podcasts now. I've never had a lot of opportunity to sit still and just listen to podcasts. And I've now been, playing them on my phone as I'm doing something with my horses. And I was able to listen to your podcasts with Amy Skinner and Leslie Desmond and Van and Gwen Turnbull. I'm like, gosh, these are just such incredible people in the horse industry. And I got a lot out of them. So you're doing a great job, and I really enjoy the folks you're bringing in and the content. It's good stuff. Now I'm starting to really like podcasts and listen to them.
Yeah. See, that's the same. Like I'd never listened to a podcast until I was on one, and now I never listen to the radio. I'm just podcast kind of all the time, and nice. It opens a lot of doors. Kind of become aware of people I wouldn't have been aware of otherwise. And,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, I really like it quite a bit. And then it's just so limitless. I mean, you can structure it any way you want it. I mean, if you want to do or learn about rebuilding 1979 CJ Jeeps, I'm pretty sure there's probably a podcast out there on just doing exactly that with some people that have, infinitesimal knowledge in that particular little area of the world. So I like it.
You're getting great information out to so many folks, just horses and bits, all of it. So kudos to you. Great job for getting out a lot of important information to folks that might not have, knowledgeable folks in their area to be able to ride with or learn from. So this is a great method or a great avenue for them to learn more just by listening to these. So good job.
Well, thank you. And I will say, like, I appreciate that part of it too. It isn't a local sort of world anymore. You can have conversations with people on another continent. So again, you're not at all limited on your sources where you can learn from. And I think that's the sort of thing where a rising tide raises all ships, so it's a cool medium. Anyway, I hate editing them, but other than that, I like having the conversations. We're still not at a point where I haven't monetized it, and I'm holding off on that as long as I can stand to, but it would be nice to get to a point where it made sense for me to pay somebody to do the editing and that kind of stuff, and that would take a pretty big chunk off of my plate. But anyway, it is what it is for the time being. Well, why don't we get into the mental health aspect of things, and how did so we met at Buck the Trend, which was a mental health summit designed or aimed at the horse and ranching communities. And Maddie Butcher, who's the founder of the Best Horse Practices Summit and produces the podcast for them and all of that stuff, this was kind of her brainchild. And so how were, like, I know how I know Maddie. How did you get roped up into that group?
I met Maddie a few years ago through mutual friends, and we were attending the Outside Circle show in Elko, Nevada. And we had some really phenomenal conversations during that weekend. We were down there to watch some live bands at the Star. And I remember the two of us were sitting in a bar and we just had this really in-depth, great conversation. And I believe we were discussing some mental health stuff at that time. We were, and I was discussing some of the journey I was on, and she shared some of the journey she was on, and we became quick, fast friends. And I'm so proud of her in taking these steps in this forefront. This is the very beginning of this tidal wave that we're trying to affect to help to normalize these conversations around mental health. And there's a couple of different folks that are working on it right now too. And I think we're going to start seeing some big changes in the information that's out there, folks being vulnerable, seeking mental health, speaking about mental health. And I think this is the forefront right now of this big change, which is awesome. And now we're talking about it on your podcast. I mean, it's fantastic. You know, Maddie's doing wonderful things. You're doing wonderful things with it. I bring up a lot of it on my Facebook page. A good friend of mine, Jeremy Morris, I'm not sure if you know him. We've been friends for years from the Moran days in Wyoming, but he was on the cover of Western Horseman in August, and he's got a podcast called Wild Courage, and he's been really focusing on mental health and some of the issues in the cowboy community. And then I've got good friends, Justin Reichert and Nicole Grady, that run that Outside Circle show. And they have been having a mental health panel at their Outside Circle show. And I was granted an opportunity to speak on that panel last year. And, you know, everyone's getting not sick or tired, but everyone's frustrated with the amount of lives that are lost in this field. The other day I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw an obituary for a veterinarian, like a good looking guy, young guy, who apparently took his own life. And so there are issues. There's a lot of cowboys working on isolated remote ranches that are dealing with some sort of mental health and they don't feel comfortable talking about it. They feel like it's a sign of weakness to seek help. And I'm very grateful that there's all these folks that are using their platforms, their different platforms, to help spread this word and get this message out. And hopefully we can find the resources and share those resources with the folks that are in crisis or looking to help someone else in crisis. So kudos to you, kudos to Maddie and Jeremy and Justin and Nicole for taking these steps to help spread this message. And this is a perfect time of year too. I mean, here it is, what are we, November 3rd, and winter and late fall is a time where we see a lot of folks getting into or having or experiencing mental health crises with the sunlight hours or less. You know, it's dark longer, it's cold, they're isolated in their house, their thoughts and emotions are getting the best of them. So this is a great time to be talking about this.
I'm doing virtual lessons with a lady in the Yukon right now, and I asked her that because like we were doing a lesson. For me, it was, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the afternoon. For her, it was already getting, that wasn't right, but it was starting to get dark. It was the middle of my day, and I'm like, oh, that's right, they have. So I went and asked her, and she's like, yeah, by mid-November we'll be down to like 5 hours of daylight a day. And I'm like, oh, I can't contemplate what that's got to be like for months on end. Like, that really does have to mess with your mind. Here, people down here bitching about 9 or 10 hours of daylight or something like that. Imagine what 3 or 4 is like. Like, that's got to be, got to be a whole different level of a thing. And we do really have some problems in this industry. It seems, especially in the generational type farm, you have the older generation, maybe the baby boomers that can't do it anymore, and the kids are not necessarily interested in, but we've got this massive chunk of land, and if we just pass it down in inheritance, the property tax is going to cut everything in half, and just the whole it gets to be a damned if you do and damned if you don't sort of a scenario. You mentioned the veterinary profession. I don't know if this is still true. I interviewed an ambassador from an organization called Not One More Vet a year or 2 ago, and at that point in time, the veterinary community had the highest suicide rate of any profession, which just seems like that can't be true. I mean, they play with puppies and kittens all day. Like, how could? But that's not quite what they actually do. And when you think of all the animals that they euthanize, the bad situations that they see of animals turned in and neglected and all of those kinds of things, there's a lot to looked down upon in humanity. I'm sure in your career as a law enforcement officer, you probably see some things that makes it hard to go home and not wrestle with the reality of some people just really suck. And
Well, I got to
so,
thinking about that with the veterinarians too, because of my first impression would be, oh, they get to play with animals all day, and they have a more normal business hours, not working all night. Of course, they're on call and whatnot. But then I got to thinking about how veterinarians would be very much like law enforcement, because they're going to deal with the humans during that crisis of euthanizing their animal, or an animal, maybe it's your best horse, and you've got a twisted colic, twisted gut, and now this person's in crisis and just in tears and doesn't know what to do, and they're highly emotional. And so I think a veterinarian probably internalizes a lot of that, just like a law enforcement officer does, when you're dealing with humans, and you're dealing with humans in crisis, and it's hard to remove yourself or just to observe. You end up taking that home with you, and I'm sure that they're experiencing that as well. So that
yeah,
probably has a lot to do with the weight on their psyche at the end of the day. So
yeah. And then you have kind of the survivor's guilt aspect of that too. If you are handling it well, then you may well feel like crap because you're handling it well, and you shouldn't be handling it well, because this is a horrible thing that you're dealing with, and I shouldn't be handling this well. This should be
yeah.
affecting me. So what must be like, there's kind of a no-win element to uh that sort of stuff. Um so we both were privileged to get to go to Buck the Trend. I will include a link to that. I know Maddie still has that page up. There may well still be T-shirts for sale and those sorts of things to try to support this, because there are plans for future ones as well, and it's not an inexpensive event to put on. Why don't you kind of? I know it's been a minute, but why don't you kind of recount it for me, and I'll jump. We'll put together our co-visions of or memories of what that weekend was like.
I didn't have any expectations when I first got the invite. I really wasn't sure what we were getting into. I didn't know what to expect when I got off the plane and in Cortez, and I know I'm meeting with a bunch of folks in a house or cabin on a hill, and I didn't know what we were going to do. And so it was great to have the icebreaker the first night, kind of get to know each other. And then obviously the next 2 days was getting into some pretty deep stuff. It was a great event, and I really enjoyed that she brought in folks from, all different aspects of the industry. Everything from obviously the trainers and the folks in the horse world, to the ranchers, folks that are in the cattle industry, and everyone had similarities. They had I think everyone weren't sure what the expectation was, but once we started sitting down and visiting and becoming vulnerable and realizing how, I think everyone there, well, not I think, I know everyone there has experienced crisis at some point in life, or has a family member or someone, and wasn't sure how to deal with whether it was emotions or how to communicate when someone's in crisis. And we had a lot of questions, and it was good to hear that we were all on experiencing the same thing and all looking for those answers. There were a lot of exercises that we did during that weekend that really made me reflect internally and see things that I needed to work on. You had mentioned the listening exercises when we did the dyads, and we had to sit in front of someone, very close, face to face, and one person would speak for 2 minutes on whatever the topic was. They would share something. Your whole job was to sit and listen, actively listen. And that is so hard for humans to do, to actively listen to another person without I know too many of them that just formulate responses to the information coming towards them without actually listening to what that person's saying. And that was a great exercise for me, to really focus on the words and the emotion of the person speaking, and see where they're coming from and try to understand that person's perspective, because everybody has such a different, perspective on life and how they see things. So that was really interesting. We all got into those, deep, dark stuff, the uncomfortable stuff, talking about issues we might have in our own lives, and how to deal with those. And there was a lot of squirming. I think there was a lot of
Hmm.
us squirming around in our seats as we shared vulnerable information. But by the end of it, I felt like a lot of us were more comfortable with communicating about those uncomfortable topics. And I think it opened up our eyes to different resources available we might not have thought about. I know the active listening part is just great for me to practice, obviously in my job on the street, and when I'm listening to the public. Uh, that you you share, and then I'll come back.
Yeah. So I'll say, like, I thought the dyads was about the hardest part of the weekend for me. And let me
Yeah.
give the listeners a little bit of a background too. So this was really a broad cross section. We had men and women. We had people in their 20s. We had people in their 70s. We had two law enforcement officers. We had an immigrant. I mean, about every which way you could think of cutting the pie up, the pie was
Yeah.
represented in that room in some way, shape, and form. Some of us knew each other, some of us didn't. So, like when we got into the dyads, part of that was to pair you with a stranger and now talk about relatively intimate things. I found the hard part of that to be the listener's instructions to not, like, you weren't supposed to nod your head. You weren't supposed to go, none of the cues you would normally give someone to say, hey, I'm listening. And I'm with, like, you were supposed to be just a wall. And
Yeah.
that I found difficult, especially when the stuff someone's telling you is the kind of thing you would want to empathize with. You don't want to be a wall and act like you're not, they know you're listening, but at the same time, are you really listening? We had another exercise. I actually appreciated this, where they gave you a prompt and you were supposed to, one person says their thoughts on that for 3 minutes to the other person, and then the other person has to summarize and say back to you what you just said. That's one of those things, like, that should be in high school, the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, and then 5 minutes of tell me what I just said to you practice in, because like that skill doesn't exist in the world anymore. I see this especially like the social media stuff we do. Every time I write an article or something, there's going to be a comment under it that makes me scratch my head and go, did you read the article? Like, that was said specifically in the seventh sentence of the whole damn thing. Like, how can you have that question right now? Like, people's comprehension of what they just should have absorbed is questionable to me an awful lot. So I thought that was a very good skill to work on. Um, we also had the exercise where one of the therapists, we did have two therapists that, and well, actually three, I guess. We had a therapist in training also that was there helping. They did an exercise where they, remember the big white sheets of paper, and
Oh
they
yeah.
wrote some sort of cliche type things from maybe your childhood, things adults would have told you and all. And then we walked around the room and we would kind of put a mark of, like, strongly agree, strongly disagree, neutral. I think it was a red light, yellow light, green light kind of thing. And then unpacked all of that. We did the group therapy sessions each day. We split in half. And the therapists, I'll probably have them on the podcast here before long too. So I guess I'll name them. It was KD and Joseph. KD and Joseph were not the same kind of person either. You remember that, like, their personalities were relatively different. Both good people. I liked them both, but you were not having the same conversation with the two of them, right? They had a very different style and approach to stuff. So Joseph has his group was very different than KD's group. And then we spent a half a day on the Sunday talking specifically about suicide and suicidal ideations, and that was where probably most of the tears got shed, because a lot of people in the room had had a very close person in their lives that had taken their own life, including one of the therapists, and so the stories there were pretty moving. And one of the things that really strikes me about that is that it is often such a shock. You know, the therapist who part of his job is evaluating people who are on a hold in a mental health facility or whatever, whether or not it's safe to release them or if they're going to harm themselves and all. One of his best friends committed suicide, and he didn't see it coming. There were several other stories in the room along those lines. And then I've never had anybody close to me actually do that, but I've had a couple of friends that were close. And it is so weird to me, especially like I feel like I pretty well know what a horse is thinking. I can get in an arena with them and I've got a pretty good bead on what I'm dealing with in short order. And yet here we are failing so miserably at reading our own species. You should, if someone's that bad off and they're thinking of ending it all, it does not logically lend itself to no one around them knows about it, right? Like how in the hell can those two things be true at the same time? And yet it's often the case. So that was part of what we were being coached on, was recognizing some of those signs. And in fact, asking them, like I found that to be one of the most surprising aspects of it, was the coaching to actually look someone in the eye and ask them, are you thinking about harming yourself? Do you have a plan? Do you have, just no pussyfooting around the topic, just bluntly. And apparently if they are, most of them tend to be honest about it and tell you, but that's a pretty uncomfortable conversation to get yourself into and to ask someone. And at the same time, a life and death level of friendship to have and to ask about. So,
and that's the tough part, that they're uncomfortable conversations. And I think that by us normalizing these conversations, maybe it can become a little bit easier to have those conversations. There's a huge problem in the mental health industry as far as with those evaluations that we were talking about. Like in my line of work, if someone has thoughts of suicide or homicide, there is a Title 25 in Wyoming where we can hold you for 72 hours for an evaluation. But you're ultimately you're taking someone's rights away. You're taking someone from their home and having them evaluated. But in order to do that, they have to say the right things in order for us to be able to enact that Title 25. And nine times out of 10, in my experience in the last 16 years, is if someone is thinking about doing that, they have their mind set on it. And there's so far, what I've experienced is I've actually had one guy who came in for an evaluation, and the counselor noted that he did not say, I am going to go home and kill myself, because that's what they need, is they need someone to say, I'm going to enact ABC, and then they can enact that Title 25. And if they say, no, I'm fine. I was just having a bad day. That guy, I had a weird feeling, and I made him pinky swear me and said, you're not going to go home and harm yourself, right? No, ma'am, I'm not going to do that. And then he went home and killed himself. So, and there was really wasn't anything I could do in between. Oftentimes when they're in crisis, there are times where they'll share and they'll allow their emotions to come out, and you can kind of work with them on that emotional state where they start to open up and they allow themselves to cry or be upset and talk about whatever it is that's bothering them. And you can start to share resources or help them see that there is a light in that crisis spot. But I've had a lot of situations where they're in crisis, but they don't say the words that we need in order to get them the help that they need. And they'll also lie to friends and family. You try to get someone closer to them involved, and they'll say, "No, I'm fine. No, I'm fine." And friends or family will leave them at home alone, which I think is the worst thing you can do. Um, and then they end up making a permanent decision for a temporary problem. Where I think a lot of the times, if a family member or if a loved one's in crisis, I think it's imperative that you stay with them during that critical crisis time, um, so that they don't, make those split-second decisions. Oftentimes they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol when they do make those decisions, which kind of numbs, their rationalization. And I think if you have someone with them, then you can be aware of if they're consuming something or doing something that's going to affect or alter their state of mind. But also they have someone to speak to and talk to during that crisis, and hopefully they'll be able to come out of that crisis period. But there's a break in the system as far as, getting people the help they need. And oftentimes in law enforcement, they don't know what to do. So they're calling law enforcement to deal with this person in crisis. Well, law enforcement, our hands are tied behind our back as far as what we can or can't do during that crisis time. And I think that the mental health counselors or the counselors in general, they're often have their hands tied because they have to hear the right things in order to enact certain things. They can create a safety plan, but unless someone says ABC, they can't stop something from happening in that in-between time. So we've got to find answers and solutions to how to deal during those crisis times, that during that crisis period.
I do want to point out here that like you kind of commonly hear the phrasing that we want to normalize mental health conversations, and I don't think many people really realize what that means. And I think Sarah just did a good job of illustrating exactly what we're talking about. The urge for people to hide these problems is so strong that they will lie to everyone in their life about it, and then make that ultimate permanent choice to temporary problems. And so it isn't the comfortable conversations we're talking about normalizing. It is can you ask your wife, your brother, your child, your parent, your best friend, are you thinking about harming yourself? And would they tell you the truth if they were? That's really the conversation that we're talking about. One of the things I was really glad that we had a couple of law enforcement officers in the group for exactly what you were talking about right there. I'm pretty libertarian in most of my views of individual rights and things like that, and so I want as little infringement on anybody's rights as is possible. At the same time, you do want that safety net where the right people can come in at the right time and get someone the help they need, even if they're not willingly wanting to accept it in that moment in time. That's really kind of the most important time to do it. I thought, Penn Jillette, the magician, Penn and Teller.
Oh yeah.
He did I like him a lot. He's an atheist. We're pretty different on a lot of things, but I find he's a pretty intelligent guy and very thoughtful, and I like his point of view. And he was talking about, he is a famous atheist. He even has a podcast on atheism that he does in an old church every Sunday, just to kind of thumb his nose at the world. And he had a guy at one of their Las Vegas shows walk up after the show, waited in line for an hour to meet him, to hand him a Bible. And he did a deal on thanking that guy. He said, I don't believe in, it didn't change my world, but at the same time, I recognize that it's like a person out on the road and a bus is coming and you can see the bus and they can't. You keep telling them to move. At some point, you stop telling them to move and you tackle them, get them the hell out of the road, right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of are compelled, if you actually believe that there's a problem, to act at some point in time. And he believed that's what that guy was doing. And so he was recognizing the good intentions behind that. And some of the stories y'all were telling us, it really seemed like with most of these problems that get to the severe end, substance abuse is incredibly interwoven into that,
Mhm.
I guess more so than I would have or have been exposed to. I have seen in my years in the horse business a pretty good number of alcoholic or dope head trainers or people. It certainly is in our profession at a higher rate than it is in a lot of other professions. Um, but I also would think most of those people, they're kind of on the functioning end of that. I haven't seen too many of them that really fell off of the deep end, but I have known a few. Um, so I think that perspective was really good. I know I'm definitely guilty. I love whiskey and I love rum, and I probably mention those things with a fondness in my voice a decent bit. At the same time, I don't drink near as much as people might think that I drink. It's a one or two in an evening every once in a while. It's not 9 every night or anything along those lines. But I think kind of like with horses, a lot of times we have these underlying causes, and the cause and the symptom may not appear related to the outside observer all the time. And if we're seeing the alcoholism, the substance abuse, the whatever the thing is, that's really not the cause of the problem. The thing that causes the alcoholism is the cause of the problem, and the thing that you've got to get to the bottom of. I feel like I'm rambling now. You want to jump in and
No,
save me here?
I think there's a couple things that you hit during that. There's definitely, I have seen quite a few trainers, quite a few law enforcement officers that have obviously issues with substance abuse. In law enforcement, more often than not, it's just alcohol, especially in my area, where, marijuana, things like that aren't legal. I don't know about in other states, but I think they use those substances that just numb uh, their their lack of being able to deal with their emotional states. Um, I th I think the movement that we're seeing right now with having um, strong individuals like yourself, me as a detective, Jeremy, in his line of work, Maddie, everyone that's doing their work right now with talking about mental health. I think the normalizing the conversation is more about normalizing the fact that everyone's dealing with some sort of mental health issue. Everyone's had sad days, bad days, frustrations with thoughts or emotions. And I think that by us talking about it, will help to let others see that everyone deals with it. So, because everyone deals with some sort of mental health issue, that we can help to normalize looking for resources or looking for ways to help themselves rather than just numbing whatever issues they're going through, whether it's depression, and of course, but there's so many different degrees to mental health. I mean, you have like severe depression, bipolar things. There's a variety of diagnosable stuff, but then you also have, your average Joe that's not, that might have, when I spoke in Elko, I was talking about like traumatic brain injuries. And with all of us in the horse industry, everyone's come off their horse at some point or another. And we've all dealt with some sort of concussions, maybe you had a colt jump on you, whatever the case may be. I had in 2016, I had a really bad wreck that rattled my brain pretty well and made it kind of into scrambled eggs. And it was pretty frustrating because I couldn't make my brain work for me for about a period of a year. And I found myself falling into the alcohol trend. I was so frustrated. I couldn't think straight. I would try to read a book. I would read a paragraph in a book 6, 10, 14 times and not retain. And the easy answer was, well, screw it. I'm just going to go drink something and stare at a TV and get out of my own head, my own space, or not deal with the issue at hand. And I think that's a common answer for a lot of folks when they're frustrated because they're not able to regulate their thoughts and emotions. So rather than seek resources or figure out how to deal with it, well, it's easier to escape from it. And that escape can be any form of addiction, staring at a TV, not being productive, that kind of stuff. So I think by more of us talking about it and sharing resources or things that have worked for us individually, personally, I think that's going to help open doors for other folks to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. Maybe I'll start looking for answers as to how to fix these things rather than turn to addiction, or turn to a substance that could turn into addiction. That becomes their new norm. And then once you go spiraling down the pool of addiction, I mean, it can go from I'm just trying to numb my mental health crisis at this time, and with drugs and alcohol, you end up in an area where you're like, well, this is pointless. Nothing's working. My whole life's crumbling around me. And now the only way out is by doing something like suicide or something along those lines. So I'm going on like 6 different directions again, but I think by sharing experiences and sharing resources, we can help to break off the tip of this iceberg in the beginning before it turns into this thing where you have this whole mass underwater that those around you, your loved ones around you, aren't seeing because you have that buried, and it turns into a real significant severe crisis event. And I think I was going to go in another direction, but I forgot where I was going.
I think it's kind of it's an interesting dichotomy to me that, you know, all of us in this business, we would kind of pride ourselves on our toughness. We've all got a story of a horse that flipped over on us and did this or that or whatever. We kind of have these skits going on about the doctor that the rancher or the farmer walks in and the nurse is telling him about it. He says, well, is his wife with him? No. Is he complaining about any pain? Yes. Okay, this is a very important question. Did he finish the job or did he stop in the middle of the job to come into the hospital? You know,
Right?
if the answer, if he didn't finish the job and his wife didn't make him, like this is really, really serious at this point, you know. At the same time, there is no glory story about this horrific thing that happened and traumatized me when I was a child.
Yeah.
Instead of being proud of surviving that, we would be ashamed of it. And that, I think, is kind of the root of a lot of this stuff. I don't understand necessarily what that is, whether that's a cultural thing or a human thing or what. I don't like to talk about this, but I'm gonna share this too. It, I've studied more psychology and all that stuff in the last 10 or 15 years since I started doing clinics. Than I've studied way more about people than horses. And I'm sure this is true of you in the law enforcement world too. You get to a level of knowledge about that you start recognizing certain signs in people that you don't necessarily have their consent. You have knowledge about them, you don't necessarily have their consent to have.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You recognize
Yes.
they make this statement and a bell goes off in your head
Yes.
and you're like, oh, now I know what happened to them, right? Or those kinds of things. And that isn't something you can address. You got to be in a pretty specific set of circumstances before you could bring that up with that person or something like that. You're going to embarrass them, drive them away. The reason I hesitate to mention this is I don't want people to come to clinics and feel like I'm judging them or something like, it's not like a superpower. It's really more of a burden than anything else. I want to be able to help people, but at the same time, it can be very damn awkward when you realize something you're not supposed to know. So what do you think about that? What is the solution to, or the weird problem with shame regarding this stuff that keeps people from wanting to talk about it or accept help with regard to it? And on both ends, the person who has the problem has shame about it. The person that might be encouraged to help them would be reluctant to talk about it for the same reason. And so we wind up kind of with this imaginary wall that does not serve us well. You have any thoughts on that?
I think we just have to recognize shame and judgment for what they are, and be aware of everyone experiences shame, but if we understand, and judgment and fear of judgment, but if we recognize them for what they actually are and choose whether to allow ourselves to feel or experience that shame and judgment, that can be a turning point. With me, in the course of the last 16 years, I've had, plenty of folks who are in handcuffs in the back of my cage going to jail. And like you were saying, you read or you feel something about them and you're like, gosh, I need to share a message with them, but they might not be ready to receive that. I blurt out whatever it is that comes to me, that I feel like they may not be ready to receive that, but I might plant a seed of something that may sprout growth in them later on in the future, and share something that I'm feeling or seeing about them that could help them later on. That's something I think we're in a transition where we're starting to acknowledge shame and judgment. And I think in the future, we're going to be able to start moving past that. We're in a weird transitional spot, like our parents and our grandparents, the types of folks that were keeping up with the Joneses and be strong and don't express your weaknesses. We're seeing a change right now in 2024 in today's environment. And I think we're going to see more growth in the future, with folks being more apt to take action and have those conversations. They're tough stuff. Humans like to have this mask on, and they live this life where you don't want people to see the insides and the weaknesses, and we're all afraid of judgment. I bring that up in the clinics too, as far as I've ridden in those clinics. I'm sure you have too, where you're riding under some big name person, and you have a bunch of folks sitting in the corner, and they're all staring and watching and making sly little remarks. And then when it's your time to go up and ride in front, that's a weight that you carry. Is what are they thinking? What are they saying? What am I doing wrong? And that's truly something we have to just find a way of releasing within ourselves. It's not something you're not going to change those other people. You can only change the way that you perceive or respond to those types of situations. As far as shame goes, I know Brene Brown's got that TED Talk wasn't a TED Talk that we listened to at Buck the Trend.
Yeah, several of them, but yeah, she was one of
them. There's a lot of great information online as far as how to deal with that kind of stuff. That's just a really low vibrational energy that serves us no purpose. Once we recognize it for what it is, there's ways to release it, but it takes a lot of work. For some reason, it's just innately in us to have those feelings. You know what I mean? And I think it all stems back to that damn amygdala, that damn lizard brain of ours, and that fight or flight. I think all of these low vibrational stuff, low vibrational energies or emotions that we deal with and we're always constantly battling, all have to do with that little amygdala that causes all these problems for us. But I think once we start recognizing that, talking about that, then we can choose whether or not we're going to interact with that or not, release it, and not have those, choose not to have those negative emotional states. So I totally went off a deep end on that one.
That's okay. That did prompt me. So I've this is one of those things I'm kind of proud of. I talked about it in the group, but I keep a folder on my phone called amygdala hijack. And so it is inevitable in clinics and things where you'll get somebody. I can remember when I first started doing this, I was helping out with a 4-H group, and they were working on having horses jump over a culvert. And this one young lady was on a horse. She was overmatched, and she was kind of a new rider, and she wound up with a high silver situation. I mean, horse straight up in the air, and the horse comes down, and she's not balanced, and she winds up, her face goes forward and smacks him up toward the pole, and it knocked her a little silly. She didn't come off, but she was done at that moment. And so most of my amygdala hijack things are like dad jokes, and I use that like a tool all the time. And the whole point of it is, I'm going to be crude, it's adult onset horsemanship. You have to say something to that person that makes them go, what the fuck did you just say to me? If it isn't at that level, then you're not going to break through. It's got to be the cold bucket of water in the face. So if you can walk up to them and say something that is funny and shocking, you can pull them out of the amygdala hijack thing, and then we can move on from there. Otherwise, they may be stuck there for 45 minutes or 4 months. So I keep every time I come across something like that, I'm like, ooh, that's going in the amygdala hijack folder. So if y'all ever go check out the show notes, I'll put some of those useful little tool in the show notes on this one. But I use it all the time. Now that I'm a little more aware of that's what this is an amygdala hijack situation. I have got a folder on my phone. I hadn't used this one yet, and wham, see how that one plays.
That's awesome. You also mentioned that failure to act a little bit ago, and I don't know why. Well, maybe it has to do with the social media and all the technology and things that we deal with today, and people having a inability to communicate one-on-one with humans. But we're seeing a huge trend in the failure to act. And I don't know how many times I have witnessed in person, or whether you're watching a video of someone. I personally watched. I was in Florida on a girls' trip, and we're all sitting on a porch, and we were having lobster bisque, which was amazing, and some cocktails. It was a girls' trip, and some little old grandma was walking through the parking lot and tripped over one of those stoppers in front of a parking spot. And I jump up, and there are people down below this deck that we're on, and they're walking past her, looking down on the ground. And I'm like, holy shit. So I jump over the railing, jump down there and help her up. I had the same thing recently. I was having supper with a girlfriend at a golf course, and I look inside, and there's a bunch of people standing and looking, and there's an old lady on the ground, and they're just standing there staring at her. So I go bailing in there and go take action and tell the waitress to call 911 and jump in and do this and that. But I see it often. We have a failure to act, whether it's someone's at the store and they ran into a display and it all crashes down and they walk past them, or let's say it's a person in crisis, or a person's crying, or a person's a family member's on the couch and just in a real bad negative mental state. That failure to act, that failure to bridge that, step over that boundary and say, what can I do? What's going on, and what can I do to help you? And I don't know why. We're humans. I mean, we should all be looking out for each other and helping each other out. And there's something that stops people from stepping over and engaging, whether it's from an event that has happened or from a person in crisis, what is stopping us from failing to act? Is it the emotional feelings or the uncomfortable feelings that we're going to have from the response, or are we afraid of getting judged by everyone else in the store for helping pick up everything from the display that's down? Like, I don't get it. I don't know why people don't want to act. And it's funny that I say this. So I have to share, when I was a kid, when I was younger, I always swore I'd work with animals and not people. I didn't like people. I'm like, I'm going to find an industry where I work with horses and not humans. And then for some odd reason, I got this not gift, but this feeling of I needed to protect and serve, this feeling that I was supposed to help people, placed on my heart. And when I took my oath as a law enforcement officer to protect and serve, I took that to heart. And I just feel like we're supposed to help each other out. So what do we need to do to bridge that gap so that we are more inclined to act rather than fail to act? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I took a note here. First of all, your girls trip in Florida, the old lady tripping over the parking lot thing. I don't know if she was hurt. Like if I walk up on that and there's a broken arm, I'm going to handle that differently. But if I had done that and walked up on her and she's not obviously hurt, I would have been over to help her up and said, "We've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty." And that would have been a totally different situation all of a sudden, right? See, you're laughing, right? It's if you can slip something like that in there, it just diffuses, the pain goes away. You know, now
I love
obviously
it.
if we need to be calling an ambulance instead, right? Obviously that's not maybe not appropriate, but um one of the things you said there about act, I got a few notes. One, I'm going to say there are three different men. This is a small case study. The only people I've ever known that have been in this situation were all men. So whether it would be different for a woman or not, I don't know. I've done three different men that had major heart surgery, and all of them struggled with significant mental health stuff for a year and a half afterwards. I don't know if one of them went, full on institutionalized, started having suicidal thoughts. They came and took all of his guns away. His wife, thankfully, was very brave and handled it correctly and believed him when he told her he was having some problems, and they acted and all of that stuff. But it seems to be something with that. I don't know if it's the facing of mortality or I think in his case, it was some of the medicines that they put him on in the healing process kind of screwed him up basically, and it took them quite months to get that dialed in where he wasn't having those kind of thoughts. The other two were, one of them I'm not close enough to have talked with about any of that, but it was very evident. He was a guy I had to interact with on a semi-regular basis, and he had an entirely different person. He went from pretty easygoing to very confrontational, and just like he was the fly in the soup, the asshole no one wanted to deal with anymore, for a year and a half after his heart surgery. So that would be a scenario where at this point in my life, if I had someone that was close to me that had major heart surgery, I would expect to have to give them grace, and I'd watch them a little closer than normal thereafter. Same with the traumatic brain injury type of a deal. That's a pretty well known thing too. Like you're talking about difficulties with emotional regulation and memory, and that whole feeling of helplessness of being trapped inside your own head, and you can't necessarily trust yourself anymore. On the action part of that, I'm not good at remembering the details of things. I'm good at remembering the gist. But there was a pretty famous psychological study, I believe, that was done in New York City, and it was they set up a kind of a back alley situation of a woman screaming, "Help! I'm being raped," and it was overwhelming that people didn't try to help
Respond.
at all. They walked right past hearing this. It was an experiment kind of a thing, but people did not go to help at all, which I find astounding. I really think there is a urban versus rural component to that, because I can't imagine any of the men I call buddies walking past an alley hearing that and not heading right up in there, the same. There was a woman not long ago on Facebook that had made a comment. I got in a little trouble for this. She was talking about she was in Walmart or something at the grocery store, and this guy was following her around, and she had kind of changed aisles, done a few things to evade him after she became aware, and he's still following her. And so I just chimed in, you need to find a man. And that was all I said. I didn't explain myself. I'm not usually that brief. And apparently I didn't check on that comment for a while. I came back and apparently it had gotten taken in kind of a Freudian context there. What I meant was, if you're in Walmart and some creepy guy is following you around, if you see a guy that looks like me, middle-aged, has a beard, like odds are real good I have a gun on me, I would love for some stranger to come up and pretend like she's my wife. I'm going to know what's going on right away. I'm going to be like, point me to him. She's going to point me to him. I'm going to rip his arms off and beat him with him. And it's going to be like the highlight of my week. Like go find a guy that looks like me, and he's going to go in guerrilla mode and handle that for you. Like, I'm sorry if in New York City or some of these big towns that's not true, but in most of the world, that's true. Go find a man, and he's gonna. Most of us are good guys. It's the whole bear in the woods and all of that ridiculous foolishness and everything. But anyway, that was part of my thought there. Most men are good men and would love to help somebody out of that kind of a situation. So anyway.
Well, we would hope so.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about humans in crisis being similar to a horse in learned helplessness? I think there's some correlation where humans can act like horses in a learned helplessness state and kind of check out. And I think that's often what maybe it's what they're trying to do when they are choosing addiction and drugs and alcohol and things like that. They're just kind of in that checked out state, just like a horse that's experienced, learned helplessness. What do you think?
So I'll say learned helplessness is a phrase to me, kind of like desensitization is to you.
Okay.
I don't think it's nearly as common as we tend to talk about it. My understanding of it is absolutely an extreme state. So one of the, like, it's closely related to tonic trances. So if you think like the elk that gets dragged down by the wolf pack, by the time that we see that and it looks really terrible, that animal goes to a place in their brain where they're not really present anymore. They don't actually feel the pain. Their system shuts down. It's a defense mechanism. So the cases where I think we would see that are probably more the long-term severe abuse cases where you're getting into like Stockholm syndrome, or like this Elizabeth Smart girl that was kidnapped and kept in the basement and repeatedly raped for 15 years. Like there's no doubt she would have gotten to that state in that process. I don't know that like the substance abuse, the trying to numb, is necessarily in that realm. I would think they would be related. That's an interesting thing. I can't say I've ever pondered on that directly. But like what learned helplessness really is, we'll stick with the animal example because that is simpler. But the animal goes through something extremely traumatic, and in the process of that discovers that nothing that they do will help.
Makes it better.
What most people who present, I'm not saying that you did this, but in the context that I see learned helplessness talked about a lot, they talk about an animal that will do anything to escape. So they become willing and compliant. That is not what learned helplessness is. Learned helplessness is the donkey that souls up and you light a fire under him and he still doesn't move. They do nothing to escape. It's not that they will do anything to escape. They're polar opposite kind of kind of ideas. So a true case of a horser, I think you'd probably be, if you're going to actually find learned helplessness, I think the mule donkey thing is going to be more common than the horse thing, just because of the nature of the beast there. But I think that's one of those terms that got thrown into the vernacular, and it's not, the true meaning of it isn't what's meant when it's used most of the time.
Interesting.
So like in the problem horse world, even among all the problem horses that I've worked with, I would say probably like less than 5% of those are in a learned helplessness state. My thoughts would be, if you think 90% of the horses that you're working with are displaying learned helplessness,
Yeah.
The deal is you actually don't know what learned helplessness is. Yeah, you're they may still have a problem, but that's not the right terminology for the problem that they have. These are animals with zero motivation, like zero, not low motivation, like zero motivation. Nothing will. Yeah. So that's a big deal. So like the girl that's been kidnapped, captured, raped for 10 years, and now she'll go to the grocery store for her captor and answer only to the new name, right?
Yeah.
That's learned helplessness. So like the drug addict to me is actively doing something to escape.
Escape, yeah.
And so that's, yeah, that's the difference. They have actually found they're still actively looking for a defense mechanism. Unfortunately, the defense mechanism that they have found is one that does not serve them well, but they're still being proactive about it. They're not actually completely shut down. I think that's a pretty common thing in the horse world right now, is the cases of abuse and stuff have improved so much that now the definitions of those words have become watered down, because a lot of people have not actually seen abuse. And so they see something that I would consider kind of minor, and they kind of blow it out of proportion, if that makes sense. I think like with the law enforcement officer, right? I'm sure you've seen some shit I can't imagine. So a bad night to me and a bad night to you probably are pretty different animals.
We recently had one of those cases with a felony horse abuse, animal abuse, where a horse was being tased and beaten with chains and stood underwater. And I mean, the guy did some horrible things to that horse. And that by far was the definition of abuse. And I actually had our prosecutor.
That's probably an animal in learned helplessness, right? Because all of these extreme things had to be done.
Nothing is helping. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about the brain. I mean, we can go so many different directions, and we're talking about the human. And if you want to see something funny, if you need a good laugh, go to my Facebook page and look up my skydiving album. For my 40th birthday, it was a friend's idea to go skydiving and fall out of a perfectly good plane. And 3 of us went, and I chose to be the second one, because if I was first, I was not going to go. And if I was third, I for sure wasn't going to go. So I went in the middle, and we had this little, podunk little beater plane. And we get in one at a time. They go up, and we get strapped to this guy and fall out of the plane. Well, remember, I'm 6 foot tall. I go up in this plane, way up in the air. Everything looks like ants down below. There's no instructional video. There's no instruction prior to. This military guy who's retired. Now he's a skydiving instructor. He's like, all right, get on my lap. And here's 6 foot me on this little 5'6" guy. Straps me on. I go to turn my legs to stick them out of the plane. I kick the pilot in the head while I got my legs out the side of the plane. He says to put my feet on this iPad-sized little platform. So I stick my feet down. I'm sick to my stomach already as I look down and see these little tiny ants. You can't even, the ground is so far below. And I'm like, there's no way I can do this. He says, on the count of 3, we jump. 1, and he says 2 as he shoves me out of the plane. Well, that's so that you don't resist on 3. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, he has one of those fancy GoPro watches to, take pictures and smile and thumbs up while you're falling to your death out of the sky. And I have no recollection of that entire experience until sometime after the parachute opened and we begin spiraling down to hit the landing mark. And I was just sick at that point. But what was interesting is when we get done with the skydiving and we go back to the office so he can pull up these photographs on the computer, my brain checked out. The second we went out, apparently there was a backflip and whatever the heck happened. I have the wingspan of an Andean condor. I had T-Rex arms. They were drawn up. My my mouth is wide open. My brain checked out and was not there. And I'm like drooling, tongue out the whole way down. It's so fascinating, but that's what my brain chose to do, was just say, you're dead. I'm out of here. And it just left my physical body to go crash down below.
Uh-huh.
And of course, my friend ends up blowing up all the photographs and plastered them all over the sheriff's office so everybody could see Sara in T-Rex arms, bright red face, eyes roll back in my head. Those are all of my photographs. But we just never know how the brain, human or horse, is going to react to whatever that event or experience is. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that guy just needs a dad joke prepared and whisper that in your ear. It brings you right back, right?
It was gone.
Maybe not in that case. Yeah.
So what do you think the solution is? So we're talking about mental health and we're talking about suicide and we're making changes and we're making this tidal wave movement to do something about it. So what is the next step that we do to help on this movement and to start making some changes and helping people find resources when they or their friends or family are in crisis? What do you think?
Well, I like what we're trying. I like having the conversation and putting it out there. I certainly want to commend you for being willing to come on here and do this. I made that offer to just about everybody that was at that conference, and I think we'll have a few of them on here, but not everybody. And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense to the ones that didn't want to talk about it, but I mean it's not just anybody that's gonna come have this conversation and then have it blasted out into the world. And so I think that's pretty important. I like Maddie's take on bringing leaders in and kind of training them to go out and you're multiplying your forces at that point, which is exactly what we're trying to do, and hopefully we're making her proud right now. And then continuing to have these conferences for the people out there listening who may not necessarily have a platform or anything, supporting this kind of stuff, sharing it to your friends. Hey, here's a conversation that I think you might really benefit from, right? That could be life-saving in some cases, or even just going and buying the t-shirts, being aware of these things. Next time you're at the vet, pat them on the shoulder and say, hey, doc, I know this job's probably pretty rough on you at times, and I just want you to know I appreciate that you're doing this and the toll that it takes on you and your staff. That might be the thing that gets that person through that week. And I mean, those sorts of little things. There's a lot of reports of people that were literally on their way to commit suicide, and as they're physically walking toward whatever place they've decided to do this, someone smiled at them and it stopped them from doing it that day. That sort of stuff is not to be undervalued. And again, I know not just anybody is gonna take that to heart and do it, but you may just be the thing that saves somebody's life someday.
Absolutely.
The therapy is another thing I kind of wanted to talk about, because I actually learned a decent bit in there. I had been through some therapy, about 6 months worth, and I am going to just say that I didn't really find it helpful. And I think part of that was, like, I didn't go shopping for a therapist. My dad had a customer that had a therapy center, and I just reached out there. And one of the things that the therapist talked about was interviewing therapists. You should probably have a conversation with 6 or 8 different therapists before you select one. And if it turns out as you're doing that, if things aren't G'ing and hawing and fitting well, then it's okay to swap, to go back and interview others. Look for, you're not every therapist is necessarily going to be your therapist, the right match, or have the right set. Like some of them specialize, and your particular set of problems may not be something they are well equipped to help you with, and they may be able to recommend you to someone else or whatever. You were talking about this way we're doing this podcast with Zoom. It seems to be a big trend in that world that now people are doing therapy over Zoom. And so just like you could take lessons from a horse trainer who's 8 hours away, you could have a therapist who's in a whole different state. And there are now multiple modalities or kind of groups, I guess, where all of the therapists that work for this group do their work online. I know Joseph, one of the ones that was at our deal, he doesn't see clients face to face anymore. He has an office and a shop in his backyard, and he does Zoom meetings and connects with people that way. I do think one of the oddly helpful parts of this is that it's, for whatever reason, it's easier to open up to a stranger than it is to your wife or your brother or whatever, just like we were having these pretty intimate conversations. I like you, I wasn't sure what to expect in that deal. I'll say I got into several conversations where I blanked out a little bit during the conversation and the listening, because I was just sitting there going, I can't believe this person is telling me this right now. Like, this is shit you don't tell anyone. And I don't know them at all. And now I know stuff about them that maybe no one else in the world, this may be the first time these words have ever left this person's mouth, right? And so it may well be that Zoom aspect gives you another layer of protection, whatever the hell it is, of dealing with a stranger, that I'm not going to run into Bob at the grocery store and have to pretend like I don't know him and didn't just tell him all about the worst shit that's happened to me in my life, because Bob lives in 3 time zones away, and Bob and I will never run into one another and have that awkward moment. So that's an option now. And I don't think most of that is super expensive either. I know we live at a time when money is tight for most everybody, but $150, you can have a session like that. I feel pretty certain. And if you did them every other week, I mean, another $300 a month to save your life is probably something you need to figure out if you're having a rough go.
So. I really appreciate you bringing up that there are so many online counselors. I think that is definitely an avenue for a lot of the rural community. For the cowboys, the ranchers, the folks that are in more remote locations where you drive 40 miles to town to the grocery store, and you might not have a counselor in your town of 67. So this is an option. Most folks have laptops or they have smartphones that they can do some sort of a Zoom capability. And with Starlink and satellite options where you can get internet wherever you live, even if you're in, remote wherever, you have those options and those avenues to be able to find counselors or, use the internet to find a counselor that works for you in a remote location. So I think that's a great idea, talking about that, letting folks know that those options are out there, and then really reiterating how important it is to find a counselor that works for you. That you vibe with. In high school, my mom sent me to a counselor because we weren't getting along, and it was not the right counselor. And she was like, your mom's not nice and you're not nice, and that's why you don't get along. And I'm like, I'm never going to counseling again. This was dumb. But later on in life, I saw my agency is so wonderful. My sheriff is all about supporting mental health. And they provide us with so many free sessions for mental health counseling per year, because in this field, we're dealing with just so much horrible stuff. And they sent me to a psychologist here locally that did that EMDR, eye movement desensitizing response. And it's this crazy thing where they have your eye go back and forth, and it helps to refile information in your brain. And it really, really helped. I had dealt with 2 suicides in a day and a bunch of chaotic stuff. One was a friend of mine. I was trying to get there to his house before he committed that act, and I didn't make it in time. But for me, it was dealing with the crisis of the families afterwards and the devastation. And that's always the hardest part for me, is dealing with all the emotional trauma that comes from the families that are the survivors behind someone that has harmed themselves or taken their lives. And I went and saw EMDR, and I spoke to my coworkers about it, and it's just one of those taboo subjects, so you talk about, I think I'm going to go do this, and no one's going to say it in a room full of their peers, but individually they'll pull up alongside your door up and be like, hey, so I know you were talking about that. I've done that. It worked for me. Hey, I was thinking about doing that too, behind a closed door. You know what? Let me know how it works for you. I think I'm going to do it too. So they were all open and willing to communicate, but not in a setting where we're all standing together. It was individual. And I wouldn't believe 20 years ago I would be talking about this on a platform or in front of other people. But because I've embraced this idea of vulnerability and trying to make that a more normalized thing, I'm finding, by talking about it, I can't believe how many people have come forth and said, I'm so glad you said something, because I'm thinking about that too. Or I was looking for resources to help me with whatever problems I have. So knowing that there's these counseling opportunities, talking about the fact that you have stated that you've gone to a counselor, I've gone to a counselor, and the benefits it has. Again, realizing that some counselors don't work for everybody. Sometimes you got to find one that melds with you better. And sometimes that might take 2, 3, 6 attempts. Not every counselor is for every person, but there are some fantastic ones out there that can give you the resources that you need. And by doing these Zoom counseling sessions, I think that's going to be really beneficial to people. And you can do it in the privacy of your own home. So your employer doesn't know, or your spouse or whoever. You can be able to, you have an opportunity to seek some resources to help better yourself and fix some of the stuff that you're dealing with, without being seen walking into the counseling service office door. If you're worried about that, you have these opportunities. So
Yeah. And especially like you're talking about in these rural communities. I mean, I was raised in a town of about 5,000 people. If there was a shrink in that town and your truck was parked in front of that office, like
right,
everybody would have known that in 2 days. I mean,
Yep.
so this Zoom capability
It's
makes
an option.
it, to me, that opens doors that are just phenomenal. It's I think it's a true gift that COVID gave the world to get
Yeah.
this stuff up and running, and the capabilities that we have. It's incredible. And like you're talking about with Starlink and that kind of stuff. And supposedly there's a $42 billion program specifically with the goal of bringing internet to rural communities, which is kind of mostly the groups that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So far, none of that money's been spent or effective, but it could solve an awful lot of these problems in these more rural places, and get some pretty important help to people that need it and deserve it and everything. So
And with the internet, there's just so many resources too. You can just Google. I mean, we didn't have those options in high school. We didn't have computers in high school. And when I was in college getting my undergrad, it still wasn't, there weren't a lot of computers. We were still carrying books and writing everything down. Well, now they can just Google, I'm experiencing this, or I'm experiencing these symptoms, and you're going to find answers. And you might find things that work for you. You might find something that doesn't work for you, but there's so much information out there to be able to find some sort of resources or get an idea of a direction to go to help yourself if you are the one that's in crisis, or to find resources to share with a family member or loved one that might be experiencing crisis as well.
yeah. Well, I'll since you've brought that up and we've talked about this, I'm going to find a few. I'll put links to Not One More
Awesome.
Vets website and all in this, and then I'll find a couple of the like I know Joseph's deal. I'll put a link to that group where there's at least one group that has at least one counselor within it. That would be someone I would highly recommend you go talk to. and and there are also, so like I'll say this, when I was doing counseling, that guy was not at all from the horse ranching world. So I would say a pretty decent amount of our time was spent in me defining certain things he didn't understand as I was talking about them. And if he had just walked like a duck and quacked like a duck and flown like a duck, it probably would have been a much more successful deal for me. And so, like, there are counselors that have backgrounds in the ranching world, the horse world, the whatever, and if you can find one of those people, then you're talking to another duck, and I think that you got the benefit of them being a stranger, but at the same time you don't have to continually remind them what a heifer is, and exactly. Things like that, because you might as well be speaking a foreign language when you're talking about what this week was like. So anyway, well, Sarah, is there anything? I think we've been on this for a pretty good while. I don't want to monopolize all of your Sunday.
I didn't hear who my sponsor is.
Oh shit.
Someone's got to be on task.
Yeah, you are. Thank you very much.
I want to hear
prepare. Yeah, you need to swallow that Coke before I start on this, I think. All right. Our sponsor for this episode is Berserkers. Ladies, it's about time for a restaurant that caters to you. We've got all the carbs and the eye candy too. All of our waiters are at least 6'1" and shirtless. Have you ever been brought a perfectly chilled glass of Chablis by a shirtless Viking? How about been waited on by servers trained to never use the word moist? At Berserkers, you'll be seated and immediately treated to 3 appetizers made mostly of various incantations of potatoes. We wrap them in lettuce so you can feel better about those carbs. No names are required at Berserkers. All of our waiters are just him. We know when you tell your friends about your dining experience, you're just going to use the same pronoun to describe the dozen or so different people in your tale. Anyway, we understand. We empathize. You can also pick whether you want blonde, black, or ginger-haired berserkers serving your every need. They all have beards, of course, and will bring mama a sandwich. So some of them also give foot grubs. If you're a good girl, they'll even let you order from the secret pumpkin spice menu any time of year. Does it frustrate you when you go out to eat and can't decide on which entree to order? Of course it does. At Berserkers, all of our entrees are 1/3 size orders. If you're torn between these 3 dishes and can't decide, don't sweat it. Order all 3 and feel satisfied and content. Enjoy the ever-changing ambiance of Berserkers. We've got an entire team of decorators hustling and bustling while you enjoy yourself. The large dining area has 3 Christmas trees up at all times, and also Easter and Halloween. That's not enough, though, so we change out certain decorations for whatever minor upcoming holidays there may be every 30 minutes. If you'd like to have a say, or our smaller dining room adds that extra element, the design team will ask you what you think. Does this fit better over there? And are these the right color as you enjoy some snacks between courses? The thermostat is always set to a balmy 78 degrees, keeping you toasty and the Vikings glistening. This dining experience is designed around you. This might sound too good to be true, but we've also got the option to get a really big styrofoam to-go cup as you leave. It has crushed ice and more water than you'll drink in 3 days. It's the perfect thing to leave in your cup holder, 80% full for a few weeks. You may have heard of our other restaurants like Long Piers Eatery. Will bring your dining experience up a notch at Berserkers.
With the holidays coming up, do they give gift certificates?
I think so. Yes, for sure. All right. Well, my apologies for forgetting about that until we're at the end of the podcast. But
Yes.
anyway, I guess we got it in there. So, well, Sarah, we've kind of talked about the past and the present. What does the future look like for you these days?
Well, Danielle, I've got to tell you, I was pretty inspired by Buck the Trend and the Cowboy Poetry Gathering panel that I was involved with, and the need for more mental health counseling in law enforcement. I think that by being an experienced law enforcement officer, being a detective, as well as an active member in the cowboy community, it really helps me to relate to those that are in need of mental health counseling. I've actually applied to grad school. Here I am, approaching 50, and I'm going to go back to graduate school to pursue a master's and certification in mental health counseling. And I'm also going to pursue certification in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization, desensitizing and reprocessing. And that is a technique that they use often in law enforcement for folks that are suffering from post-traumatic stress. So getting certified in that locally is really going to help my community. I've been kind of leaning towards a thesis that's going to focus on researching and analyzing the peer perception and stigmas surrounding the seeking of mental health. We've had a lot of discussion about that at Buck the Trend and at the other panel that I was involved with, trying to figure out what we need to do to help change those conversations. And I believe if we can make the conversations around mental health as normal as the conversations around physical health, people are going to be more accepting of the ideas of mental health counseling. We go to the doctor for pain, strains, and broken bones. I mean, we go to the doctor for heart, digestive, and circulatory issues. So why wouldn't you seek help when your brain isn't working in tip-top form for you? You know? So that's the avenue I've decided to seek. I'm coming close to retirement in law enforcement, and I think I'll take the last few years of my career to pursue obtaining a graduate school degree. I found a program that's online. It's a hybrid program, so it's mostly online with some weekend classes at a campus that's about 100 miles away. So I think that'll fit into a working schedule for me and get that degree before I end up retiring from law enforcement. So fingers crossed I get accepted into law enforcement. I mean, I'm a little long in the tooth these days. So hopefully they'll take someone like me. But I think for my community, especially being someone with a law enforcement background and an agricultural background, I'll be able to relate to my community members that are, seeking mental health or having mental health issues and seeking some sort of counseling or resources. So that's the avenue that I'm going to take, being inspired by all of you guys.
Well, that's wonderful. And I have to say, like, if I were going to sit down for like marriage counseling and there's a 24-year-old in there, I'd just be like, fuck off. Who are you kidding? How are you possibly going to relate? So with you, you've lived it, you've walked the walk, got the scars, all that stuff. I think
Yeah.
you should be a shoe-in for that kind of a deal. And you want somebody that can relate a little bit, and it's not all theory for them. And you've, as we've talked about, you've seen plenty of stuff, and so I think that's terrific. I really commend you on that, and I'm excited for your future.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'll let you know how it goes. Maddie's been helping me with getting my personal statement put together and making sure that it's grammatically correct and in proper order. So I sure appreciate that help from her. And well, fingers crossed. Hopefully they'll accept me into this graduate school program.
That's wonderful. So how did you come across the thesis topic of stigmas and all of that? Was there any particular impetus there, or?
That was a conversation that's come up in both Buck the Trend and that Elko panel that I was involved with. And it seems to be the hot topic every time we talk about mental health. And speaking from experience with my own department, where I have a sheriff that's offering to pay for mental health counseling for my coworkers, and they're extremely hesitant to go to counseling. That seems to be a big issue. I know there's counselors out there. I know there are resources available, but getting folks to cross that bridge and actually seek the help seems to be the biggest problem. In doing my research, as I've been looking into what I wanted to do as a thesis and seeing that both law enforcement and the agricultural community, including farmers, have such a high suicide rate, and part of that problem is that no one is ever willing to go and seek any sort of mental health counseling prior to crisis. So if I can figure out a way to help bridge that gap, I think that's going to be a big win for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, if a rancher had a herd with pink eye, they would identify the problem and jump out there and fix it, treat it, right? But then
Yep.
when the ranchers got anxiety, all of a sudden we can't deal with it. We're in a world where we have commercials on TV for erectile dysfunction and period cramps and all of that kind of stuff, and we can't talk about things from our past or what it's pretty
Or
weird,
dealing with
the things
depression
that
due to
we
beef
decide to be.
prices or whatnot, Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, there's
I
always
mean,
something going wrong in with your cattle in the markets or whatever the case may be, or maybe you get brucellosis in your herd and they've got to wipe out your whole herd. I mean, that's going to be a cause for some serious trauma. So
for
there's got to
sure.
be
And
ways that they're willing to deal with that or work on that.
yeah, and there's so many aspects of agriculture where you can do absolutely everything right and still get gutted. So it isn't necessarily skill or performance based like a lot of other things are, because you are at the mercy of a buffalo that rubbed noses with your herd, like brucellosis
Yep.
problems or drought, or any of those kinds of things that can come along that have absolutely nothing to do with you, or the Bureau of Land Management decides to get somebody in there controlling your stuff that doesn't have a clue of what the hell the world is like. There's
Or the
it's
fires
a
that ravaged this country this year. I mean, the fires just ran through everyone's summer ranges and wiped out feed everywhere. So there's a
yeah.
lot of ranchers that are going to be looking for, pasture next year or feed for this year because their hay crops have burned. So there's a lot of loss there.
It's really more of a cause for concern of why anyone is sane in this
Right?
deal, more versus you know, the only sane response to all of this is to be a little crazy, right? I mean, if you're
Right.
perfectly fine after all of this, that's really the sociopath we need to be watching out for, because something's not right about those people, right?
You might be onto something.
That's I think 3% of the population historically is psychopath and 2% sociopath. That means one out of every 20 people you meet could cut your throat and walk on down the road and never think about you again. That's just the realities of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right there.
Well,
I would hope that
oh,
the numbers were a little bit smaller, but
I think that's about what it is. It really, like, I like to think of myself as a nice person, but it just takes one slow walking person in front of me when I have somewhere to go, and that illusion is completely removed. I mean, yeah. So
now,
we all
Daniel,
have
if
our
that driver
weaknesses.
in front of you is going 20 miles an hour under the speed limit, just remind yourself this is a test in patience. This is when you work on your breathing and slowing yourself down, and this is just one perfect test in how you can practice your patience
So
or flip
I'm
them
not
off,
bad
either
about
one.
driving. I'm like the slow driver in my whole family. But
Oh, wow.
walking, if I'm in like Home Depot and I need to get to the 2x4s and I know where they are, I'm on a mission. And if you get in my way of heading to where I know I'm supposed to go when I'm walking, like I'll run you down like that. But driving doesn't bother me too much at all. So, um, and in
I just run
Louisiana,
them
I don't
down
know
the
if
rail. Run
yeah,
them down the
I don't
rail
know
like
if
you do in the pen, just like in the working cow horse. Just run that person down and just you know get in front of their shoulder and move them back and get past them.
If so, this is one of these little things about me. If like April brings me somewhere and I'm about to be bored for 3 hours, I'm definitely about to start lunging people, and they might not have any idea what's going on, but I'm going to see if I can get the person in the blue shirt to go stand next to the person in the yellow shirt over there, or what. I'm going to find a way to amuse myself, no question about it.
The crazy thing is, I've done the exact same thing.
It works. Yep.
It does. It's quite entertaining.
I'll bet I am the subject. I'm like that guy that 30 people are saying, there was this time like 5 years ago and they're talking to this guy and I'm that guy. I have no doubt I'm in somebody else's story out there. Uh, so anyway.
All right. I guess I just want to leave with, so I'm a huge fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's got a lot of stuff online. He shares ways to refire and rewire your brain. And there's tons of information out there. I got all of his books. I've really enjoyed reading his books. Sometimes it feels like it can be a little far-fetched, but there's a lot of useful information in there. I want to remind your listeners that anytime we feel anxieties of the future or pains of the past, and that's invading our space, if we can become present, those, when you have anxiety or when you have like the stress of past events, if you get present, those two things can't reside in that same space. And I know that this works. It's worked for me. So if you find yourself in some sort of a critical place, or your brain's just not quite working right, or you're super anxious about something coming up, if you can get yourself, go for a walk outside, work on your breathing, just breathe in, breathe out nice and slow, and get yourself present, those other feelings are going to go away. So that's just a quick little tip of something that you can practice at home or practice out and about, that can get you into a better mindset in the moment. And it works. I've done it. I've worked on it. It works. So
I like it. Very good tip. Very good
cool.
tip. Well, Sara, thank you for your time and for being willing to have this conversation with me. I definitely applaud you for the bravery of doing this, and thank you for your service as a law enforcement officer as well. It kind of makes me I just want to go speed around in your county just to see you walking up behind me, and then like, no, when you walk up to my window or something. But anyway.
Daniel, if you get pulled over by me, it's an experience. I can guarantee that.
I'm sure.
Well, thank you for conquering this difficult topic. And I'd like to see more people bringing up these conversations about mental health. I applaud everyone that is currently starting this trend and starting this wave of information to get out there. It is a crisis that we're dealing with, and I think we're at the forefront of this movement, and let's keep going forward with it. So thank you.
Very good. And we'll have a bunch of links in the show notes for this one. We'll have one to Sara's website if you are you're in southern Wyoming. Is that right? Or
Central Wyoming.
Central Wyoming. She's got clinics around there. I think she'd be a hoot to hang out with for a weekend. I can confirm that for sure, especially when she's not having to talk about suicide and can just get into the funner side of life. So, all right. Well, Sara, I hope we get to ride together somewhere down the road, and thanks again for coming on.
We'll do it. All right. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.